Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Hillman?
Here. Mr. Hanlon, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda, are there any modifications to the agenda?
Yeah, I have two requests. I'd love to move, oral reports before the action items. And secondly, I would like to move consent agenda item number 14 into action items.
Are there any other modifications to the agenda requested by board members?
Yes, I'd like to, I'd like to address a couple of things. Maybe this is the point, maybe it isn't, but
Jim?
you want to wait on it?
Yeah. When we get to the consent agenda, I'll call on you for your comments.
All right.
Next item on the agenda are public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No.
Moving right along, superintendent's report, Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. So I just want to clarify quickly on the agenda. So that's item 14, the approval of the bid for carpet removal tile replacements for Jefferson Early Learning Center. That is going to become action item number 3. And then the oral report will move up in front of the action item. So just want to make sure we're good on those 2 agenda changes. A couple of things that I wanted to share with the board tonight under my report. One, just a reminder for the board and certainly members of the community here that our survey on the April 4th referendum question is open. We have, as of just before the meeting, we've had, we just crossed the 2,000 threshold in terms of survey respondents. I think we're at 2,008 survey responses right now. Certainly moving, especially with the help of Chamber of Commerce and a few other entities that have pushed it out across the community. I think our representation of voters within the community has really has increased, which is good. So again, that survey runs through the balance of this week and then through next week. It closes on Friday of next week. We certainly have a few other reminders from the district that will go out through our communication mechanisms. And again, we've partnered with anybody we can in the community to ask them to push it out. But most important, we've asked individual residents to share the link to that survey as widely as they can through their social media channels, through any channel to get that out. I think that data is going to be really important, certainly as we continue to move forward. I wanted to also just give the board an update. We haven't done this in a little while, and especially with new board this evening on the consent agenda, with any of the donations being accepted this evening. Once you accept a couple of the donations that are on there for this school year, the 2016-17 school year, the total amount of donations accepted by the board is just under $170,000. And again, those are primarily donations from PTA entities, the Student Excellence Foundation, as well as some individual smaller grants that have been written and accepted. So again, we continue to be very thankful for the generous support in our community for education, and again, we're almost $170,000 in donations accepted this year. I'm going to ask Faith to jump in and give the board a quick update. One thing I wanted to kind of put on your radar, and this probably will fall kind of in the category of another unfunded mandate, let's call it, that kind of has as its roots, and there's a research base behind this, but the The state board made a decision this year and just released very recently a new set of calibrated cut scores for Access. Access is the test that all of our English learner students take in the school year, and the test itself didn't change. The items on the test didn't change. The state board simply recalibrated what it meant to pass the Access test, and I think as Faith will tell you, and I'm hearing this now around the county, what it means is significantly less students are going to be exiting from EL programs than they did. So a student that gets the same exact score this year that would have exited them out of needing EL support a year ago, they will now continue in our program receiving EL services. I think for us that's potentially a shift or an addition of about 133 students that will stay in our EL programs next year that would otherwise have
That's how I feel.
have exited. I think Dr. Smith from the state board just heard me talking and sent that letting go now. But Faith, go ahead. Is there anything else you want to add to the mix?
You already commented on all of it, but it's about 133 students that we think would have exited given how our track record would have been. And that does translate into the different levels at elementary and high school. If we were to use our same ratios to support those students, it would be about 6 extra teachers to be able to do that. So we'll have a lot of thinking and discussing to do because we're already at best practice on what that would mean as we have a lot more students in the English language program next year than what we're used to.
Yeah, and just we are not the only school district experiencing this, and strictly even from a hiring perspective, it is difficult to find English learner teachers as well. So again, just this is very, very new information that really just came as the Access scores. I think districts knew that those scores were being recalibrated, but until the actual scores came back, showing the new scoring thresholds, districts had no idea, but it's going to have a lot of districts either scrambling to increase staffing levels here at the last minute or make decisions about what student ratios look like within programs, one of the two avenues that the district's going to have to go down. So again, there's a rationale behind it, I know. It's just from a timing perspective, it is a very difficult point in the year to release that information. In your green folders, shifting gears one more time, Dr. Rammer's left in your green folders some information about graduation. We will be honoring our graduates from Wheaton North, Wheaton Warrenville South at our graduation ceremonies on Saturday, May the 27th. So there's information in terms of where you need to be, what time you need to be there. So please take a look at that, and certainly if you've got any questions, let me know or let Bob know, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. I think that's it. That's all I had on my list for tonight.
Any questions of Dr. Stewart?
Real quickly, on the EL, do we have the rationale behind that? Or they released that information as to why they decided to do it? Because I think I read something today, we have over 150 unfunded mandates in the state, so now this is a fairly significant unfunded mandate. I'm just curious what the rationale was.
So part of the rationale behind that, they exit students from the English learning program when you get to a certain proficiency in a combination of your reading, your writing, and your speaking skills. And you are at a point then where you can really benefit from instruction in English, but none of those students that are just at that level of English acquisition, unless they're very, very young, they're on grade level. It just means that they're ready for instruction in English. So the thought behind that was, let's make that language level much higher so that they're not just reading on a level that they could get instructions in English, but they're closer to reading on grade level and getting that higher. So on the one level of how much support some of those students need to be able to be successful, there's some rational thought behind that, but it is a lot more costly, and we have been doing a really good job of integrating those students back into our classrooms and addressing their needs through differentiation.
I have a question on that too. You mentioned 6 teachers. So could you generally describe the day of the students that's in that program? And I assume it's K through 12 or whatever. And why it would be that many more teachers? Is it a classroom size, or are they in all day and not all, whatever?
Sure, the English learner students, there's a wide continuum of services that are needed. Some of our students are refugee students that have come over and are needing even basic things like bathrooms and how to manage all of, even have never seen books before and all of that type of thing. And those, when they come in, are really in an English learner class their entire day as we're getting ready to do that. Some of our students who come in and are quite literate and proficient in a different language, and they're just needing more support in, they're already literate in their math skills and language, but they need English to go along with it. They might start off at a larger portion of their day and then be moved down to just an hour a day of support to try to get them the skills and the vocabulary they need to acquire the language from a gen ed or an English speaking class. So we have some of our students that are in self-contained all day. Also, the state requires us, if we have 40 students across multiple grade levels at one school that speak the same language, which we do currently at North and at Johnson, we're required to provide education in their native language. So at those schools, we're having to do part of the day in Spanish and provide instruction there to keep their native language proficient as well. So that is a component of what this looks like. The majority of our students, especially after 3rd grade, because a lot of our students come in at kindergarten and would usually exit by 3rd grade. It takes about 3 or 4 years. They're not getting very much of their day at all from their English learner instruction, but that person is still providing support services and helping gen ed teachers do some of those accommodations and things that are needed. So you asked of a typical day of a student. It's kind of all over the place depending on the needs. And our staff, some teach a whole half day or a whole day with the same students in the class, but the majority of our English learner teachers I see these students for the first hour of the day, and I see these students for the next hour of the day. And at the elementary level, it's across all grade levels. At middle school and high school, it tends to be not by grade level, but by content. I'm helping the students learn science, and I'm also certified as a bilingual teacher or as an English learner teacher.
I think the question I have is, when we talk about this category of student, we'll call them on the edge of that transition to getting away from the secondary. Is that what's the ratio of in the given point in the day between that? So I'm trying to get to the understanding of why we need 6 teachers for this. Are they spread around the district too much, or what? Why? That's a big number. That's a lot of money, and it has significant impact. So I'm just trying to, how can we work around that, or can't we, and so on.
Right. Those 6 teachers are spread across all of the elementary, middle, and high school levels. So some of it is where the impact will be at a specific school. Our ratio now for students is lower from teacher to student at middle school and high school because they have to divide all the different content areas. It's harder to match all those schedules and pieces together. So it's not easily, like, if all of those 133 students were at a similar school or even split between 2 schools, it's not, it wouldn't require 6 teachers, but we have them at all different levels. And then what gets more complicated at the high school and the middle school level is we're talking about those band of students that are not in all day. They're going to be pulled out just for support for science or social studies, or we sometimes serve their needs for co-teaching, so you've got someone who can speak the language and the physics teacher in the same room, and that adds up rather quickly.
I think the concept here is very good. I want, that's the group that we have to reach out to, it's this cost that we're looking at here is a big one. I mean, when we talk about mandates, some are expensive, some aren't. This is clearly an expensive mandate. So is there any relief being suggested by the?
No, I haven't heard any yet. And again, I want to be clear that at this point tonight, really my goal was just to make you aware of this. So, as we've talked about the potential staffing impact, we've not worked through those details. That's not a recommendation in front of you this evening. There's certainly no action on this item. This really was just a heads up at this point that this came down at the very last minute, and we would not typically be in late May talking about adding a group of teachers for a particular program that we didn't have some sense was coming. So that was really our only point tonight, is make you aware of it. When we get to the point where we've perhaps developed what may be a recommendation around adding staff if need be, that will be back in front of the board with, I think, a lot more of the details you're asking about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Schuler? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have 24 items in the first part of the consent agenda and a separate consent agenda for an item in which one board member will have to abstain. So I will read the first 24 items. Number 1, acceptance of gift from Whittier PTA. 2, acceptance of gifts to Monroe Middle School. 3, acceptance of gifts from the Lowry McDonald Company. 4, approval of revised policy 2.100, board conflict of interest. 5, approve revised policy 4.15, identity protection. 6, approve revised policy 5.120, ethics. 7, approve revised policy 5.230, maintaining student discipline. 8, approve revised policy 6.210, instructional material. 9, approve revised policy 6.70, teaching about religion. 10, approve revised policy 7.100, health exams. 11, approval of the middle school social studies curriculum. 12, approval of school-wide Title I program for Johnson School. 13, approval of bid for roof replacements at Leesbrook Elementary and Edison Middle School and ROE permit applications. Number 14 has been removed to the action items. 15, approval of proposal for physical education uniform vendor. 16, approval of extension of current lease of driver education vehicles. 17, approval to dispose of surplus assets. 18, approval to dispose of surplus technology assets. 19, approval of resolution appointing treasurer and approving the treasurer's bond. 20, approval of treasurer's bond coverage. 21, approval of dental contract with Blue Cross under the NIHIAP program. 22, approval of bills payable and payroll. 23, approval of minutes, May 2, 2017 special meeting, and approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to December 2015 as allowable by law. And 24, approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any item board members want removed from the consent agenda? And Jim, you had a comment here?
Yeah, we as a board received the agenda and the attachments on Friday in general for the Wednesday night meetings. And subsequent to that period, we have a lot of questions that come up from board members. And I think that, I believe a lot of those questions are something the public should know. I think they're, for transparency purposes, clarification of issues, for the same reason the board member is asking for those questions. I think that should be part of the public record, whether we read them in or we talk about them and not do as many items in the consent agenda. In addition, I think that Dr. Schuler spends a lot of time responding to these, and I think that's his time could be better spent. We meet at night to have these kind of discussions, and and I think that again we owe it to the public to have these things disclosed. I don't think there's any big issues on these as a rule, but the reality is there's questions that I think the public will ask. That they're not going to be any different than any board member, and therefore we should just discuss them in the open session. So when we have things like acceptance of gifts, those are non-controversial, I'll call it. But I literally saw, I was going to suggest that we took out item 5, which dealt with the identity protection. There was a question on that, a lengthy one. Number 8, which was, 8, there was something that was instruction materials. 13 was on the roof replacement. 14, we did move. 15 was on the uniforms. There was a number of questions on. 16, we had the leasing on the education, the driver's ed vehicles. 21 had questions about the health insurance or dental insurance in this case. And 24 was dealing with certain issues on the, personnel report. And so, I guess I'd like to get, this is kind of our first meeting in the new cycle. And, I personally, I never do a lot of questioning on that, because I think it should be discussed at this level. And I really think we have to get away from it. So I'm looking forward, if we continue to get as many questions, off of that agenda that require lengthy answers, I think we should just remove them from the consent agenda and start it that way. Maybe providing a bit of background why one wants to do that, but instead of having these lengthy responses that are necessary, and sometimes when I see those lengthy responses, it creates another question for me. So, now we're starting to get into topics of was that a public meeting and all kinds of things. So I think we're overusing that process. And it disappoints me from both the transparency and the time and effort that this is where those should be discussed. And Dr. Schuler's time is valuable, and I don't want him writing books to respond to that. So that's kind of my reaction, and at this point I'd be happy to, on every one of these items that we did have long questions on, I would suggest that we move them out of the consent agenda if anyone so thinks they're that important. Otherwise we should, I would like to read them into the record, truthfully. But, at this point tonight, I don't know what to do, but I think it's a move forward issue. And I think we can discuss some of these as we normally do on the consent agenda, but I don't want to shut off that conversation, I guess. So that's kind of the point I'm trying to get at.
The point well taken, Jim. As we proceed to the consent agenda, the next thing I'm going to do is ask Dr. Schuler and staff for any information. To the extent that we get information from Dr. Schuler and staff on some of these items, that will take care of that. Then I'll ask if there are any questions or comments board members would like to make with respect to any specific item, and maybe the questions or comments will address some of the things that you've raised in your emails and answer those questions. And to the extent that I'm still left, I'll ask if there's any more information we need to have on that. So if that's okay, I'd like to proceed with moving ahead on the consent agenda. Dr. Schuler?
Just for clarification, are you asking me to cover all the questions that we?
No, just cover what you plan to cover.
Okay. I wasn't planning to cover a lot on the consent agenda because I do truthfully think most of the questions asked were clarification questions, especially around the policy items. There are a number of policy items where I think board members just asked clarification on language in terms of the impact of the health exam policy, what we in fact do if we're if we have a homeless student that under the policy has an exemption from a portion of it. There were a couple of clarifications just on the personnel report. I think one clarification because we had a teacher leave at one point in the year and a couple of people covered that position, and so it created a couple of equivalencies beyond 1.0, but I don't have any additional information to provide on any of the items.
Just for the record, the questions raised about policy issues were policy item number 5, number 8, and number 10. And then a couple of questions were raised about the bid for the roof replacements at Leesbrook Elementary and Edison. Are people satisfied with the answers they've received on that, the questions they raised with respect to that bid? Mr. Paulson, I know you raised some. So. We've removed to the action item the approval for the bid for the carpet removal at Jefferson. There were several questions raised about the uniform vendor for physical education, the proposal to approve that arrangement. Mr. Hanlon, I think Ms. Crabtree had questions about that. Have your questions been satisfactorily answered?
Yeah.
Yes. And then there was a question or two about the extension of the current lease for driver education vehicles. I think those pertain to the efficiencies we would generate by doing so. And then a question with respect to the approval of the dental contract with Blue Cross under the NIHIP program.
I did ask that question. So I understand that, so there was a letter from Gallagher, was it Gallagher? Or was it from NIHIP? It had all the different categories of coverage we included. And I understand we're just approving the switch in the dental carrier. But within that, it talks about a medical renewal of 8.2%. And it's kind of complicated how our medical year is different than our fiscal year. So I just wondered, and I know back in January you talked about a presentation where we're going to hold what we were going to project flat for fiscal year 18, and then moving forward it was 3%. I'm just wondering, are we worried about the 8.2% for next year versus we have projected out through fiscal year 19 through 22 at 3%?
You are correct. This fiscal year entailed part of our self-insured plan and part of with NIHIP. Because the year is still relatively new, our plan year is started October 1 with NIHIP. So we're still somewhat immature in claims. So they're looking back a full 12 months. The last 3 months of our self-insured plan, we had very high rates. So we've kind of had bad experience. Moving forward, I'm not as worried. We do see peaks and valleys with our medical costs. We've had good years. We had bad years. Unfortunately, we're experiencing a bad year currently. But the overall, the pool went up by 0.8% for most others in the pool. There were, they have a range that you can go up or down based on your experience, similar to what we see with our workers' comp and our liability pool. I mean, you're basically judged somewhat on your claims, but overall the pool went up 0.8%. So to answer your question, I think 3% is fair and safe right now in the model. We'll continue to watch and see what our claims are doing. We have seen them start to come down over the course of the year a little bit. We'd like to see them better, but again, we thought too when we started out in the beginning of the fiscal year, there was probably a lot of nervousness on the part of folks, and they were going in under the old plan trying to get medical things taken care of, and that's why we probably saw the spike, and we do see the spike in the summer months anyway. So we're still in what's called an immature look at all of this, and so as we move forward, we'll continue to monitor it and keep the board updated.
So the 8.2% we're going to experience starting in year 2 of NIHIP is not too different than what we were putting into our budget planning for fiscal year 18.
Right, correct. The budget this year was artificially inflated to some degree because of that, and recall that premiums did go down by 10% originally, so premium costs are actually still not going to be back to where they were 2 years ago.
They're going to be lower?
Yes.
Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions with respect to the consent agenda?
Yeah, I have one on item 19, approval of resolution appointing treasurer and approving the treasurer's bond. Could it have some color on what that bond covers? What are the elements that it would cover and the situations that would be invoked?
Sure. The Illinois School Code requires that we bond for a percentage of our overall treasurer for investments and things of that nature for the school district. Obviously, when we invest, it's safety, liquidity, and yield. So this really is covering the treasurer position who's in charge of handling those investments and claims. Again, we're required by school code. The district also in the CLIC pool has additional coverage for any type of issue that may arise as well.
I mean, specifically, are we talking about fraud or something of that nature that
Correct.
Based on that person's action or lack thereof?
Correct.
Okay.
That covers just the treasurer, not the treasurer. But actually, all the activity funds are dealt with at this level. So in reality, it's activity funds and district funds. And this is now we insure up to 25% of the largest amount of money we've had during the year. And it used to be 100%. It was very costly. So the legislature changed that a number of years ago. So.
Correct. And a plug for our local broker who waives their commission for this and has done so for years.
Who's that?
Lane? Langenhager, Vincent, and Moore.
Thank you, Langen, Hager, this and more. I have another question. In the expenses on the bills payable, I noticed there's a large payment to Performance Services, Inc. And I recall looking back at some old minutes the other day, and I recall that there, as we enter in those contracts with them, there's payback periods. And in theory, we're saving utility costs or whatever. Do we monitor that on an ongoing basis when we make these types of expenditures?
Yes, Performance Services provides John with reports on the ROI and the energy savings, so we do monitor that.
Have they been achieving what we expected?
Yes.
One other one, on ethics. I think there was a section in there about employees working on multiple jobs. And I recall there was something, a letter sent to the board about potential conflict on a coach or something like that, without getting into those details. But would that cover that item? And if so, have we dealt with that in any way?
There is no conflict
Okay.
in that situation.
Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, I ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Matheson,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Vroman?
Yes, the initial consent agenda passes. Since I've exhausted myself in reading the 24 items of the first consent agenda, I'll hereby turn over the second consent agenda to the Vice President, Mr. Paulson.
Oh, if you see some action over here, my battery is about to die. It's my computer. So I think I'm getting a new computer. Okay. So consent agenda item number 2. Number 1, approval of the resolution designating depositories. It's easy.
Are there any is there an item that the board wants to remove from this part of the consent agenda? Hearing none, Dr. Schuler?
No additional information.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to this consent agenda item? Hearing none, I ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda 2 as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Erickson,
A second.
seconded by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Because I'm a board member of the Wheaton Bank and Trust and Wheaton, part of the Wheaton Trust system, I abstain.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Vroman?
Yes. The motion to approve the resolution designating depositories is approved. The next item on the agenda is an oral report with respect to the 2017-18 budget planning. Dr. Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. And just for purposes of clarification, the reason why the board reorganized the agenda and moved the oral reports up in front of a couple of those action items is that the request this evening was for the board to gain more insight into some of the potential items in the fiscal 18 budget. So that's the budget that will be presented to the board for tentative approval in July and officially approved in September. The board expressed interest in understanding what are some of the areas within that budget that could be reduced or cut in order to achieve perhaps a larger funding number for capital projects. So following the April referendum, the board had asked for this item to come on. Given that a couple of the items that were on the action this evening involved major expenditures for next year, we felt it important to have this discussion first before you consider potentially action on any of those items, because a couple of them are included in the items that we're going to project for you this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farley. Mr. Farley is going to run the board through a list of some opportunities that we've identified. I want to say clearly at the onset, these are not necessarily recommendations from staff. We are responding first to the question of what are the options that are available to you. Certainly we are happy to answer any additional questions or give additional perspective on any of these items. And again, these are not decisions that all need to be made this evening. This is not an action item at this point. It's an oral report intended to create or facilitate some additional discussion on items that you may want follow-up question or answer on. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farley, who's going to walk you through just a couple of slides identifying some of the options, and then we'll bring back to board questions or discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. I'm going to walk the board through this brief presentation tonight. And as Dr. Schuler mentioned, we've got some items listed here that are related to discretionary items that the board could consider if we were to want to increase the capital spending out of next year's budget to address more items. But first, though, I want to touch base real quick on next year's budget as it relates to the Sherman-Durgis formula and the implementation of that. If you recall back to January, when we were doing our 5-year budget planning, we had instituted we'd shown illustrated a couple charts that illustrated with the reset and then in FY18, and then the second one with the full allocation implemented in FY19. So what I want to talk a little bit briefly about is the FY18, because when we illustrated that reset amount in the budget, and I think the board has in their green folders copies of the Sherman-Durgis, the two sheets we did. One was the reset that the Finance and Facility Committee had reviewed and was part of our discussion when we set up our board policy in that regard. And then there's the full implementation one, which again we were talking about for FY19. But when we did when we looked at the FY18 and put in all the assumptions that we do on an annual basis, we also included that reset amount for Sherman-Durgis in the FY18 budget. And looking ahead, we had about a $950,000 deficit that was illustrated through that model. So we wanted to update the board about some of the things we're doing already as part of our budget planning for next year to address that perceived deficit. And again, I won't get into much of the revenue side right now, what's happening at the state level, because there's a lot still up in the air in that regard. But we really went at it to some degree on the expenditure side and looked at some things we could do there. So first, we have in our education fund, we froze all of the purchase services, supplies, capital outlay, dues and fees, and the outplaced tuition. So the budget for next year is not increasing. In fact, right now it's actually a bit under what we budgeted last year. And if you recall in the model, we had about 1% increase that we had tied into those figures moving forward. And so we're looking at probably about $200,000 in savings there. Secondly, in the O&M fund, JR and I have been working and looking at the budget and looking at some of the utility contracts going forward, and look at some. We've had some retirements that have popped up out of that we weren't planning on. We, as a reminder for the board, we outsource once folks retire for most of the positions, and we've had some move out that are now going to be backfilled with GCA contracted employees. Obviously that line item will go up, but we do realize the saving, which is part of the reason we outsource some of these positions. So through facility staff retirements to outsourcing, and we do have one position that we're hiring in-house, a maintenance position. We'll see reductions there, as well as reductions in overtime. We've continued to really clamp down on our overtime spending and continue to see some benefit there. So the reduction in utilities is probably around $100,000, and then the staffing is another $200,000. Another $100,000 there. So a total of $200,000 in that bullet for the O&M fund there. Additionally, we every year after the year starts and the summer building season happens, we sweep what are called developer donations from the local municipalities. Those are donations that when developers come in and build houses in a school district, they have to either donate land or it would be ostensibly for a new school or donate, there's a donation formula that every municipality has. So we plan on sweeping at the end of the summer probably around $250,000 from our local municipalities and developer donations that are not included in that budget, or not included in that model. Again, we're waiting until the summer building season is over, but that's funding that we're going to put into the budget. And then finally, we've been carrying some state grant money, state grant funds. It's really money that comes from local utilities for energy savings. We've received about $115,000 this year in our budget. We have probably another $200,000 that we're expecting. We don't know the timing of that, but we're assuming it's probably going to come after July 1. It's interesting that the state holds that money up because it's really money that we all pay in our tax bills, or not tax bills, in our utility bills, that the local utility companies like ComEd and NICOR and such, that it goes to help with some of these energy savings programs. So that's funding that we're also going to carry forward that we had taken out of the model moving forward. So we're looking at right now about $850,000 of combined savings and reductions to try and bring the budget into balance. We obviously will not bring forward a budget that's out of balance with a caveat of we're still waiting to see what's happening at the state level. Obviously, I think the board's been apprised that we did receive that first quarter categorical payment from the state for September towards the end of April. So we have that in there, and I believe there's been some reference to some capital news that the state comptroller has not indicated whether we will see another one. I recently heard that they may release some special ed funding because they believe that's a priority, but we're still waiting to hear what's going to happen there before the end of the fiscal year. Through board policy, our audit will recognize up to 60 days of receipts, so we could receive money up till the end of August and have it count towards our budget, but we're still in a little bit of a holding pattern to see what's going to happen in Springfield. So that said, that's really trying just an update of where we are planning-wise for next year's budget relative to making up that difference that we were looking at for the implementation of Sherman Burgess, which we have at about $2.5 million. If you recall, we had about $1 million in the budget this year, so we had $1,405,000 roughly to catch up with, and we're looking at just shy again of a $950,000 deficit based on the assumptions and everything moving forward. So before I slip into the next portion of the presentation, are there any questions on any of what's been presented so far?
Just to clarify a couple things. First off, we're starting off with an estimated $950,000 deficit. Okay, and that included a $2.5 million funding for the capital improvements.
Correct.
Okay, so basically we're trying to now fund the additional 1.5.
Correct.
Okay, and avoid the $1 million deficit. So I mean, in reality, it's $2.5 million, is it not? I mean, we're already in the hole $1 million, so we make $1 million go away, now we're even.
Correct.
But that original budget only had $1 million in it for the capital improvements. So really, we need $1 million plus $1.5 million, I would think, to reduce this, to get to even. Is that a fair statement or not?
Well, we included in our model the $2.5 million, and at the end of the day, we had about a $950,000 deficit with that level of funding based on all of our assumptions. So really, that's the number we've been chasing all along.
Okay.
So again, we feel these reductions, and there'll probably be a few more tweaks as we move along and get to the budget to the board. We plan on bringing it to you in July for posting. Public hearing in August and September approval, but again, we're still looking at, still waiting on some items. Obviously, staffing, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but staffing is a factor as well.
Okay, in light of that, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. You know, these to me, to eliminate that $1 million deficit and fund $2.5 million of the Sherman Burgess funding, you know, we because the referendum failed, you know, we're really looking at, you know, whether we restart now or restart later, is $6.5 million or $4 million more. Okay, I think as we move along on this budget process, I would like to see the impact of that $4 million, whether it's this year or next year, because it's gonna eventually hit us. And, you know, I think it's something that, you know, as we move on alternative things that we may wanna do in the next, you know, 6 months, this is where the pain's gonna come in, because these aren't painful yet. And I think we have $4 million of pain, you know, that we haven't addressed in this model. So as we move forward on these, I'm gonna continue to ask that question, where can we find 4 million more? So, you know, because
Jim, I think the question you're asking is where we're going right now. So, I mean, we're starting to go there. We're not fully showing you a $4 million delta, but I think what you're gonna see is part of the answer to that question, which I think is in response to a question that board members have already asked, and that's, so everything that we're getting ready to talk about are additional reductions that would push you beyond $2.5 million in terms of a funding level for next year. So what Mr. Farley's already has talked about, which, you know, is some trimming around, you know, the edges of the budget, was a function of how do we get to 2.5. Now we're talking about, you know, you want to go deeper than 2.5. Here are some of the options that you can consider to get beyond 2.5.
and that's the next section of the presentation.
Correct.
So, and because these don't add up to or 4 million.
They do not.
And
They do not.
unless cost reductions or hiring freeze, it's an estimate at this point. Okay.
And just to clarify, the things on this list that we're going to see are the things that we can do for fiscal year 18, because we're already past the date where we can make staffing changes. So the big dollars aren't even available to us until fiscal year 19 next year.
Okay, moving forward, again, this is where we want to talk about if the board would like to put in additional funding to capital projects above and beyond the 2.5 that we've already accounted for in the budget next year. And so, as Mr. Paulson mentioned, that staffing, a lot of those decisions have to be made. There's notice requirements and such that are back a couple months ago. So some of the things we've talked about here under staffing relate to the first one's a cost avoidance, and that'd be a hiring freeze, where we would have to make the decision that we were not going, you know, class targets and other programs, we would have to decide whether or not we were going to hire those positions moving forward to cover the class targets, or, you know, again, it's a cost avoidance of the all-day kindergarten programs of that nature, where we would just not be hiring additional staff. Total hiring freeze. There's not a dollar amount we can put to that right now. We know we have some classes that are close to the target throughout the district that I know Dr. Rammer is monitoring very closely, but again, we could decide to freeze any further hiring. The next one is the math coaches. It was a program that was instituted last year. A great portion of it is funded through title. Those title buildings receive federal funding to pay for those coaches. The amount you see here is math coaches that are paid for out of local dollars, not through the title grants. So these would be non-title schools where we could pull the math coaches out. And then finally, currently have an administrative position open at the district office, and we can look at not rehiring that position.
It's a question on the math coaches. So those are elementary schools, right? And there's 5 schools that are Title I. So we have 8 left. We share it. So we're talking about 4 teachers. 4 math coaches.
For math coaches, we use Title I money and Title II money and district money to fund all of the math coaches. And Title I only allows you to use dollars if you are doing something up and above what you're doing in every other school. So for instance, I can't use Title I to say I'll do 5 halftime positions through Title I and everybody else I'll do district. Title I has to be above and beyond what anybody else who's a non-Title I building is getting. So you're right on the number of FTE that it would be, but there are different funding sources, and it isn't that you just get to pick how things are going to be funded for the math purchase. That was probably way more of a complicated answer than what you wanted.
I got it.
What's the result that we've had from math coaches? Could you refresh my memory of how that's shown up in statistics of performance?
Sure, this is only the first year of that. We did write measurement targets for the end of the school year. We have not done the end of the year district assessments for me to report out on that, so I don't have this year's data yet to see what the growth had been on that. Anecdotally, lots of improvement, especially for our students that are at those lower levels, but I don't have test scores yet to give you.
I'd like to, as we go along in this process, I'd like to make sure that we link those two things, the economic cost and the performance gain that we may have experienced. If we can do that in some way, that would be helpful in making that decision on what pieces we may cut. If that shows outstanding impact, I want to move that to a different line. I don't know what line, but, whatever. I think it's important that we link the two things.
I have a question. Can you explain how we decide how many sections of half-time versus full-time kindergarten we're providing?
Sure. We hold a registration day where parents indicate are they interested in all-day kindergarten or half-day kindergarten. We do all of that online. And as parents sign up and we get at least 16 students in a class, then we say, okay, we're going to open an all-day kindergarten class to be able to house that. All the other students then, other than if they haven't indicated interest in all-day kindergarten, go to half-day. When we get all the way to 26 students in our all-day kindergarten class, then we're full and we start waiting lists. The exception of that is if we get to 32, 34 students, what we've done before is started a second class. We did that for quite a few of our schools this year. We had record numbers indicate interest in all-day kindergarten. We've now not started 2 additional programs at Longfellow and at Washington where we have enough interest to run 2 all-day kindergarten classes, but because of budgetary constraints, we haven't opened that because there are still spaces for those students in the half-day program, but we do have students on a waiting list at both. So it's a number game of how much interest has been generated, whether we open up additional all-day kindergarten classes or half-day. Every single one of our elementary schools had enough interest in all-day kindergarten to run at least one section of that this year.
And does the tuition from that program truly cover the cost of running those classes?
Yes, it does.
Is it not true that some districts in the surrounding area, just as part of their curriculum, offer all-day kindergarten without a tuition charge?
That is true. There are varying ranges. Some are at no cost, some are at minimal costs. There's a wide range.
Faith, real quickly on all-day kindergarten. Am I right in that I've read data that says by about the time typical students reach 3rd, 4th grade, that the all-day kindergarten benefits kind of level off to the half-day? For the at-risk kids, it does make a difference, but that by the time the average child is reaching 3rd or 4th grade, that the benefits kind of plateau.
Most of the research on that is more of a Head Start program or of the preschool. I have not been privy to the information that you're talking about with just the all-day kindergarten piece. And we haven't had our all-day kindergarten long enough to really say that I've got data within our district to see how they do long-term, versus that. We see a lot of benefit, like you already stated, especially for our students that are struggling or our English learners, having a lot more impact and making them much more successful, ready for 1st grade than our half-day. And we continue to see, as you mentioned, with the students that were more at risk, having a lot more benefit of having a full-day kindergarten.
Chris, I think early on a lot of that data too, one of the things that some of the early studies didn't account for is adjustments in curriculum as a result of a full-day program. So if you're simply running a full-day program, but you're running the same exact curriculum and pacing guide, you're doing a half-day program, then you're not going to necessarily realize or see the learning gains. So that's one piece. But the second is that's typically the case when you're measuring performance based on kind of traditional test score metrics. The other metric that's often used to evaluate the full-day program are the number of students that are requiring intervention as they're moving on to first and second grade. And generally those results are very positive for universal full-day.
Moving on to technology, and again, as Dr. Schuler mentioned, one of the items that's on the agenda as an action item tonight is relative to the student information system, or the SIS implementation. And as you can see, we've broken out the costs for the first year and some of the training and analytic costs that are also included in the budget moving forward for next year relative to the SIS plan again. I'm sure Rod can speak in greater detail to it as questions come up about it, but again, this is something that's been on the radar to take care of for the last few years. There's a storage upgrade, that's another area, again, Rod probably can speak better to, but it's probably a very critical item that is in the budget for next year. We have listed that one as well. And then finally, some PD software tied into our one of the systems we currently use for is it ASAP? Evaluation that we were looking at purchasing for the coming year. And then finally, on this page, transportation. Back in the last round of reductions we looked at, we reduced the high school activity routes, but we also decided not at the time to do the middle school routes. But again, that's something, activity routes, those are the after-school routes, taking kids home after activities, usually around 4:30 at the middle schools. So we have the ability, that's an item we could look at for transportation. Also, the parochial routes, there's some, and that's been, I think, a board member has brought that up in the past as well, relative to taking a second look at the circumstances. I think there was court circumstances involved in parochial busing, and a lot has changed locally that may allow us to take a second look at that again. I think that's probably something that we need to look forward a little bit further to work through, but that's about the spend on that transportation for parochial routes. Any questions on those two?
So we pay, we're paying for students to go to maybe St. Mike's or places like that. We're paying for the transportation, correct. And that was a court order.
Is that a court order towards us or a court order statewide?
It's a court order towards us at the time. It actually was, predates me. It was pre-1995, so aware of it. There's school code speaks to transportation of parochial students, and generally some school districts do allow, you can have students get on and off existing bus routes that drops off nearest to their home and nearest to the parochial school. There was litigation back, and again, I think it was late 80s, early 90s. The district decided at the time it was better to just set up independent routes. We could review whether our existing routes could handle parochial students to St. Mike's and St. Irene's is the other school in Warrenville. There also is, in the school code talks about pace busing. There pace busing, the advent of that is picked up quite a bit locally, so that's another option that we could look at as we re-review whether that court finding is still valid.
On technology investment, I believe there's an offset of retiring the old system, is that correct?
There will be in the second year and then in year 2.
And then are any of the investments mandatory for this year? No, maybe thinking more about the storage. Will the storage fail if we don't do it? The SAS is more of a choice. Storage could be a bigger issue.
Rod, do you want to speak to that?
That's correct, yeah, the storage is, the current storage solution is 7 years old. Brought in when I think it was one of the first purchases in my tenure here. It is failing, I actually think 2 days this week already we've had them out. We have 4-hour turnaround for those, but the older drives just are failing on a daily basis, and this is part of this implementation, and this isn't being brought until June, this purchase in front of the board, but it actually takes part of the service structure that we put in place, and it's an add-on into our current information system structure. It's not like purchasing a whole separate storage solution. It's just kind of adding storage to a system we already have in place. So to save cost, I think the current system we have was around $300,000 when we bought it. This is a lot less to just kind of add on to new virtualized server structures within our current system.
So Rod, if we're going to, can we add the storage without implementing the new student information system?
Yeah, those are completely not related, yes.
Is that a one-time cost, that information system? Or is that an ongoing, as I recall on the current system, we had an ongoing software support number. How is that entered in, and is this a one-time cost, and then there's an ongoing as well? Or?
Yeah, that's in the report. That's $207,000 the first year, plus the 25 and 40 you see there for the training. The second year is 128, the third year is 132, and then it should level off closer to around between 90 and 100,000. Not sure where we're at 4 years out, which is comparable to what we pay right now in Synergies, is around 90,000 a year. Yeah, that's the yearly subscription for 13,000 students to have their information in the system.
Okay, so the 90,000 would kind of be an offsetting cost then on this. Is that a fair statement? Or you're saying we would also incur a 90,000 cost?
No, it would be offsetting in its second year, and then year 4 or 5 might level out to about what we're paying for our current sys now. So if you were to look at it as an all-in, you're probably a little under 300 or a little over 300,000. Sorry, I did my math wrong. To implement this over the first 3 years, different from what we do now, but we will be paying double these into the next fiscal year.
The Synergy would have to be paid continuously while this one is transitioning. So the savings wouldn't occur the first year.
That's correct.
One of the conversations that occurred over the last year was about services that are going to be bid in the year, and the synergies or the efficiencies we find by rebidding them. Has that come into play in any of these numbers anywhere? Not specific to technology, but just in general.
No, I don't think with any of the numbers that you're seeing on here, none of those have to do. So obviously the top section on staffing, those are not publicly bid. Certainly the student information system, there were several products vetted as a part of the selection process, but that's not a publicly bid process. That's a negotiation once you've identified your solution, and really the same on transportation.
Let me ask the question differently. Are there any current services that are scheduled for rebid this year that will see efficiencies from?
In technology or in general?
In general, I mean, the conversation was going to be a lot of, if we just rebid everything, there's a lot of savings. What I'm trying to get after is I don't think those actually exist.
Well, hopefully the bus system that jumped up a lot will recover some of that, or it will go down maybe, I don't know. I doubt it, but that was a gigantic increase last year. And, I think these transportation costs here are big items that, particularly the parochial one, and I do recall that history of that, and, it was whether we had separate routes or not, and I think back in the day, the district maybe had a little more money, so I think that's an important one to look into. Again, we have to feel the pain, so does so does everybody else.
To answer your question, there are none of your major contracts that are currently outsourced are up this year. So I think your major contracts are around transportation, custodial maintenance, food service, and those contracts are not up for bid this spring.
The only one, transportation, we are bidding taxi service, which is a smaller piece that's obviously not related to the larger contract.
Bill, before we flip this page, I want to go back up the top and talk about the hiring freeze. So we've had a lot of conversation about class size targets, and we've heard from community members about class sizes being too big. So can you kind of lay out a scenario for me? I should be looking at Dr. Schuler. So let's just say we have fourth grade at this, I don't know, name the school. I don't want to name one because this is going to be for the story. So we have fourth grade where we're getting a number of students that might tip us into requiring a fourth section to not exceed our target. Does this mean that if we do a hiring freeze, we don't hire that teacher and the class sizes in that fourth grade at that school would be above our target? And that scenario might be in 3 or 4, 7 different locations across the district. Is that what I'm understanding could happen here?
Yeah, so a hiring freeze means we're not going to add a position not without specific board approval to add a position. Recognize we put this together before we just talked to you at the beginning of this meeting as well about the potential of the need to increase English learner staff. So yes, to answer your concept, Brad, what it would mean is that as numbers increase within our sections, we would allow those numbers to rise. Dr. Remy, you might have a better sense of just kind of the number of sections right now sit kind of at or near targets.
Correct. Right now there are about 6 grade levels across the 13 elementary buildings that are on the cusp of exceeding the targets. And so in the freeze, it would be, we wouldn't automatically, once that target is breached, automatically at that. So for example, at fourth grade, the target is 30. So if we had a school with 2 sections at 30, normally, if there was one more student, we would open another section across those 2. In the freeze, we would say 61 students, not enough to open a 3rd section, we would leave it where it is.
So that takes us into a whole really complicated conversation about the impact of student size on learning and the ability to do differentiation in the classroom. And then you get into the whole makeup of the student mix within that particular classroom. It's parent impact. I'm sure we would hear from parents in those particular classes, as we have in the past about particular schools. So to me, on this list, that's a one line item that I would imagine we would hear the most about from particular parents.
And Bob, just for sake of information, would you review those the targets across the board? You shared the 4th grade.
Kindergarten and 1st grade are 26, 2, 3 are 28, 4, 5 are 30.
So when we talk about 6 situations right now, it might be a particular grade amongst those K through 5 across our 13 schools. Well, it's not district-wide. We're not theoretically raising class sizes district-wide. It's just kind of targeted locations.
Right, and it may be, in some cases, it may be simply one student. I think the conversation changes if those 2 sections are at 32 and they get, 5, 6 kids move in. And I think it's a different conversation than 1, or 2. Is that a significant difference? And the research on class size is pretty consistent. It's been that way for a long time. Class size and learning. There really is no impact in terms of learning in class size. Unless when it's above or below or above 15.
And then is there a process in place? So for example, say a 4th grade was sitting at, at that cusp or just goes over, but at that 4th grade, the needs are very strong in that building. So do we have a process in place where we may have a hiring freeze in place, but because there's a significant EL population or a significant IP, population within that grade level that puts those needs maybe higher than what maybe another classroom might be like? Or do we have anything in place where we could look at that on an individual basis?
You do now. I mean, the individual principal has the ability to call and advocate for an increase. I will tell you that every circumstance tends to meet that criteria. I mean, as you're certainly talking, and this is not a negative on principals. They're advocating for their buildings and their staff and certainly their students. But I think you're gonna end up hearing that appeal on almost any section that's nearing the target.
And I can say, having been a classroom teacher, there are years I had 30 to 32 children, and there are years I had 18. And sometimes my years of 30 to 32 children were much easier to manage than my years of 18. So I hear what you're saying, Dr. Ramler, about class size and student learning doesn't always, larger class size doesn't always mean that there's an issue with student learning.
Before I leave this page, I just want to go on the record that I'm a big fan of the math coaches. I think, we had a lot of positive comments from our community and from our teachers when we started that this year. I have a teacher in my teacher communications group that has raves about that process. So, we have a lot of hard decisions to make. Some impact student learning this year, some don't, but that's one that, even though it's a big number, I feel it's something we try to find a way to hold on to for at least a couple more years before we can really measure whether we're having an impact of that.
I'd like to weigh in on that as well. I had conversations with all of the elementary school principals as we were heading into this election season, and I specifically asked about the math coaches because it was new, and the enthusiasm was overwhelming, and my impression that I got in every single school was that they are keeping those people incredibly busy and being very creative in how they're using them. So they sounded like probably some of the best utilized staff in those buildings. It would be very sad to see that go.
I think in the big picture, what we're talking about, none of these things we want to see go. But, we have to deal with the reality, and that is the community has said, we have significant deferred maintenance, building problems, etc., and we now have to fund those out of current operations. And that, therefore, the failure of the referendum is creating the circumstance where we may have to cut these. These aren't luxuries. We're well beyond luxuries. We knew that going into the referendum. So I think that we just, we're going to have to deal with the problems. And, I think math coaches are great, but, we may not be able to afford math coaches. And that's the problem that we now have with the funding. I'm more concerned, to be truthful. We're talking about this estimate Sherman Durgis thing that says $2.5 million or $6.5 million, whatever the number is, but we could have, clearly in the short run, whether it be the next few years, and this is going to be something the facilities committee has to deal with, but we may need $20 million in the next 2 years. I don't know that. And, we have some fund balance and things like that, but, we're not talking about starting on ground zero and moving forward. We're talking about existing problems that have to be fixed. So those numbers could far exceed the 6 million or the 2 million, whatever the number is. So we have some serious issues that, can go beyond this. And we have some fund balance that can buffer that. We have some other source of money that could possibly buffer it. But, this is the thing that we now, as board members, have to respect what the community has said, and that they said, these are the cuts we want, or things like this. And that's the challenge we have as board members. We want to talk about curriculum and performance and so on. We don't have the money to do that. We've got to live within the money that we're supposed to be given here. The state is giving us no guidance, no new money. If anything, we're looking at less money from the state. We only got, 10 million of operation money from $130 million from the state anyway. So, it's all on our property owners. And therefore, this is the plan that we have to come up with, and this is the reality of the failed referendum, is to deal with that deferred cost. And, we have to take it out of operations. There's no other choice.
Mr. Farley, we want to move forward. Let's get through that second slide, and then we can come back to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Now moving into curriculum instruction. This is the part of the faith and service where I try to explain curriculum instruction. So I may lean on her to jump in here from time to time. But we went through her budget, and again, these are items that are allocated in faith's budget for next year under curriculum instruction. Obviously, you see the list of new textbooks that are up for purchase in different areas, biology, foreign language, history, PE, and PACE program is about $260,000. One of the items we asked the board to approve under the consent agenda was tied into this next purchase, and that was the extension of the driver's ed card lease for one more year if the board were to choose not to purchase driver ed simulators, which we're looking at right now in R&D. We could get those on the same schedule and look at the program in total as we move forward. AP bridge program, advanced placement bridge program over the summer of 18. So that's not this upcoming summer, but it'd be dollars allocated for the program that would start after the completion of school next year, about $65,000. PACE identification testing, again, PACEs are, that stands for gifted program, 28,000. And then we took a look at a lot of the professional development opportunities for teacher and staff. There's a county-wide institute in March every year that our secondary level participates in. There's PARC, MTSS, Tech, PACE. Kagan is a speaker that's would come in, assessment, and then we have a week of learning in the summer, so that's about $57,000. There's a LLI reading intervention program, I think that's tied to MTSS, if I remember correctly. New assessments in writing and middle school science for $21,000. Some analytics tied into the SSA, and then a new math program for $4,000. Other questions on the curricular items? Baker, I can answer.
I actually didn't make the connection between the driver ed simulators and the car lease. I didn't understand that.
If the board were to,
sorry.
By extending that lease for 1 year with the vehicles instead of entering into a longer term lease with vehicles, if the board were to choose not to purchase the simulators this year and push it to next year, or we could, and then the cars and the simulators could be done at the same time to give us a year to look at that program and look at overall at the program. I think there was a question from a board member on our list about what our requirements are for offering driver's ed programs at our high schools. So we could look at the program in total.
Are we mandated to teach driver's education?
State mandates that you offer one section of classroom driver's education at your high schools.
So just classroom?
Just the classroom portion. We offer the simulator portion as well as the behind the wheel.
I had a question about that as well. I know there are districts where they only, well, and some districts where they require driver's ed as a graduation requirement, where they only offer the classroom portion for no cost. But they offer the driving portion as well, but the kids have to pay a fee for that. Have you ever considered that?
I'm not sure that I recall any in the history of splitting it out that way.
We pay a fee right now of $250, is that right?
That's correct.
Quick question, it's really not a question for tonight, but maybe for our next meeting, the advanced placement bridge program. I know that there's a new initiative in the district to try to promote more students taking AP classes, and this is a measure to help them do that. A lot of publicity lately about the pressure that our students are having, high school students, activities and AP exams. And I think, maybe that ties into the social emotional learning conversation we have coming up in our future discussion. I think maybe if we can discuss that as part of that conversation, that might be helpful, if that makes sense.
You want to discuss the challenge of AP with SEL?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is our huge pressure on high school students, anxiety issues, big news in one of our neighboring districts. I don't know if that ties into an SEL discussion or not, but I mean, from what I've read and felt and heard from other people, the push for more AP exams or more students taking AP programs in the high school might be connected to social emotional issues. So.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Brad, I want to, just for point of clarification, the initiative that the district has been working under, the AP Equity Program, is more about creating access and opportunity for students that otherwise were not accessing AP. So I think some of the concern you're talking about around AP, which again, valid discussion, tends to have its roots probably more in kids that may be taking too much in the way of AP. We're talking about students that have never had that opportunity, and so you come back to the conversation that I think the board members not too long ago attended Redefining Ready piece, and Redefining Ready doesn't say that a student needs to have 7 AP classes, but it does say they ought to have an opportunity to experience a college course while in high school somewhere at least once. So that's more of the initiative, and again, just kind of tying it to the budget. I think what we recognized in challenging or moving more students into that opportunity was, in order to experience success, they needed this bridge opportunity to experience the success. But back to your point, not to diminish the point that we can certainly have that conversation, but our AP equity has been more on students that haven't otherwise had an opportunity.
And just for clarification, Dr. Schuler, this AP Bridge program, we've had them in our district now for about 3 years, haven't we? Where we've been encouraging students who have been challenged either because of EL or other reasons. This program encourages them to enter into AP courses.
Yeah, the Bridge program is not new. It's been enhanced somewhat by the equity effort.
And the success that this program has had over the years has been documented. Like this, I've heard great things about the math coaches as well. And this Bridge program has gotten great results. But the challenge that Jim Matheson has pointed out here, there are so many things that offer great opportunities for our kids that we need to take a look at, unfortunately, from the circumstances we're in.
Can you refresh my memory on where we stand on a cost per student compared to other districts? It was discussed during the referendum, I know, and I don't know that I focused on it at that time, but I believe we are in the lower quadrant of that area for surrounding districts. Is that true?
Yes, relative to our comparable districts, we are. Bill, do you remember the exact location?
I know Indian Prairie is the lowest. I think we may be next, if I remember right. And then St. Charles, then Elmhurst, 203 in Barrington.
And we're actually, this year, our spending per pupil actually dipped below the state average this year for the first time as well. We kind of just crossed under.
When you say the state average, you mean like a southern school in southern Illinois, a farm community, where their teacher costs may be far less per dollar than it is in the Chicago market, is more than we in Perth?
No, what I'm saying is that across the state, there's an average spending per pupil taking into account every school district in the state. I guess there could be a circumstance like you're talking about, but we've always been just above that threshold and actually dropped down below that threshold.
So there's a lot of school districts in the state, and many of them are in the southern part of the state where the cost of living is far less. So I got to believe that, we talk about it with the 6 districts, I guess, that we compare ourselves to, and they're all, and those are unit districts as a rule? Yeah. So we're next to last in that thing. So we're talking about reducing costs even further now. Is that also? One other item on here that I don't see is the online courses. Is that in one of those groups or not?
ELO is not.
What do we spend on that approximately? It's gone down dramatically. I think this year we were at 28,000 to be able to do that. We've had so many students participating in summer school, which is a paid participation, that we're actually recouping quite a bit of our money. That's pretty bad. So this is kind of the brief overview list, huh?
Yeah, Bill, you want
we
to
get to go down to the real
couple of revenue options here, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. Just wrapping up the expenditures again, save the the hiring freeze item, it's about, you're looking at about 1.7 million of dollars that are in the plan for the current FY18 budget. I did mention at the beginning we don't have large revenue items, but we do have a couple revenue items that we want to talk about. One's tied to board action on a future item based on the the Finance Committee's recommendation. We did make some changes to the fee schedule, and that has about a $37,000 increase in revenues to the district if the board is to approve that line item. And then next, the board, I think, was made aware that the Carroll Stream TIF that recently ended, Carroll Stream actually had a balance left in that TIF, and while we do see a number of our municipalities that like to port that money over into other TIFs or spend that money down before they redistribute it to their taxing bodies, Carroll Stream has redistributed that to the taxing bodies, and actually as of today we received around $390,000 from the Treasurer's Office of DuPage County as they received that fund and pushed it out to the municipalities that were impacted by that TIF. So our recommendation is to move that into, that money is going into our operating account right now, and then at a future date after the start of the fiscal year, we ask the board to move that money into capital projects to pick up some of the costs associated with the roofs. We felt that the roofing projects, it made sense to get all of Edison completed. So we asked for some of that cost to come from this $390,000, as well as an agenda item that's coming up here relative to Jefferson, our Learning Center, and the use of those proceeds to pay for that. Again, I think it's worth noting that's a one-time payment. There is the village is holding back about $110,000 in case they get any property tax appeals on that property, because they do not institute a property tax. They would be subject to having to repay that, so they obviously, when we talked about this at the joint review board meeting with that TIF, it makes sense for them to hold some funds back. If they have no appeals, then they would redistribute the rest of that proceeds to the school district, and that would be about another, or to all taxing bodies, that'd be another 60 or 70 grand potentially that would come forward. But again, this is a one-time occurrence. This is at the end of a 23-year TIF. So with that, I know we've gone through some questions, but if there's additional questions or other information that we can receive or provide to the board, that would be helpful.
Bill, when will we start receiving the property tax revenue from the Amazon warehouse in that piece that's in the law?
Sure, that building is going up rather quickly, so we could capture some, if not all of that here in this tax levy year coming up in 2017. When we talked to them at the time, we thought that we may have a partial tax year. It really depends on how complete it is. It's gone up very fast. From my drive-bys on Route 59 that I haven't talked my way back there, but it looks like it's going up pretty quick. So we'll work with the township assessor to find out how much of that he's going to put on the tax rolls right away. But that has gone up quicker than I think than I thought it would.
And for the record, we have an abatement agreement with Amazon for the first 2 years of if that property comes on the tax rolls.
Yeah, the initial impact is about half that we would see the first 2 years as we work through that abatement. But again, it's $700,000 additional proceeds.
How much of that is in the budget though for 18?
We put some of that in there. Again, I'm still a little concerned about when it's going to actually hit the tax rolls. We did put it in the model to be in partial in 18 and then moving forward. So we did capture some of that new growth in there, but again, I'm still a little concerned about when exactly how that's going to be assessed on a tax year basis. So we're hoping to hear from that soon.
Yeah, because we wouldn't receive any of that till June of 18 anyway.
Right.
So I mean, it's not really a revenue we can count on at this point. And it's a little, it'd be only half of that in 18 and so on. So, half of a half of a half doesn't add up to a lot, and you do have some of the budget already for it.
The only question I've got, there's a supporting document here, public probably doesn't have a copy of this, called Capital Plan, and identifies the fiscal years, and it speaks specifically to the Sherman Durgis policy. And to Jim's point, it was our understanding, the last set of numbers I received, and as did the board, was if the referendum failed, then there would be a 6.5, 6.7 capital improvement obligation based on the policy. And this, am I missing something on this slide? Because I don't see that number anywhere.
You should have two slides. One was the reset number that we were going to use for the FY18 budget of $2.5 million, and then there's the, it has reset value under the header on the left side, and then the number that would be going out to 2019 is about $7 million. That was the non-reset. Did you only get one, Jim?
Yeah. Now, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's probably my mistake. Disregard the question.
I think as a follow-up to that, we still have that facilities committee issue of trying to identify what we really need to be spending, because that's really an estimate of a 75-year depreciation number. So I mean, the reality costs are the ones we're gonna have to confront. So, I think again, even though we want to budget it in some future year, I mean, the reality is we may have to spend those dollars faster than that. So I'm a little leery of saying that we can just defer that a year out, because we may have a demand in the next year for a big number. That's something we have to tie into with the facility workers.
Yeah, the Sherman-Durgis policy isn't connected to the estimates that we have in our capital facilities plan. The Sherman-Durgis policy says, based on the age and size of our buildings, the work we put into them, we need to be allocating estimated budget dollars to fund future improvements. Just because we see 6.5 million doesn't mean we're necessarily going to spend 6.5 million for one. We might spend 3 and then build it up over a period of time to fund bigger items. So this is not a funding model. This is not tied to the cost estimates. That's what I'm trying to say.
Any further questions or comments from board members with respect to this discussion item?
So we look forward to the
Jim, I guess the one question that I have is that I don't know how quickly we can return to this list. I mean, if there are a few of these items that the board has interest in actually moving forward with reducing out of the budget, there certainly are groups of people in the community that would be impacted by those. I don't think we can wait too long to begin to make, some decisions around a few of those things. So I know we fielded a lot of questions, but we certainly need to move a decision-making process along, at some point as well. So
I'd like to see some kind of, a quick, we had a 400-page book that, had some times and test points in it for improvements. And that, had some year cycles on it. If we could kind of, recollate those or re-add those up based on really kind of one-year impact items, that would give us, I think, a better feel for what our funding needs. If it's like Brad just referred to, it's going to be $3 million the first year, that's something we can deal with. But if it's going to be $10 million the first year, that's a different issue. So I think, I need some guidance to have an idea, from JR or whoever that, we would gather that information so that we would have a basis of making an estimate. I mean, otherwise we're kind of shooting in the dark here. We can just guess at it and say, here's the number we're going to set aside because we can only afford this because of the impact, etc. But, the reality is I'm concerned that we may need some real serious work done in the next year. And if we don't, that's fine. And then, that'll help evaluate what number we need to put in there or how we further need to reduce the upcoming budget. Or, we'll call it the operational budget.
Dr. Schuler, with respect to the point you raised, that we don't really have much time, we're going to make adjustments to the extent we can for the upcoming budget year. We need to move quickly. I did send out to all board members my committee assignments, and I got back generally acceptance or approval of those assignments. And for the record, on the Teaching and Learning Committee, we would have Chris Crabtree and Jen Erickson Finance, Kim Matheson and Jim Gambiani. Facility, Brad Paulson and Rob Hanlon. Community engagement, myself and Chris Crabtree. Human resources, myself and Mrs. Erickson. And then Rob has agreed to be the board liaison to the Student Excellence Foundation. With these committee assignments, I'd like to see if we could schedule committee meetings within the next several weeks and have the appropriate committees address the items on the PowerPoint that we've seen here and develop recommendations that we could that can be presented either at the June or July board meeting, hopefully the June meeting, but I want to be realistic about time frames. If that sounds like an acceptable way to go and there's consensus here, is that something we can do, Dr. Stewart?
Sure.
When do we have to pass the budget, actually? Isn't it in September, or is the...
By September 30th.
Okay.
Where would the conversation around driver's ed take place? What committee would that be?
I think that's going to happen in about a minute. We can talk about it, under the fee schedule. I think it's linked to the fee schedule.
Yeah, that's correct.
Jeff, are you looking for things on this list that we should target as reductions for fiscal year 18?
Well, I'm assuming that's why obviously the board asked that question, was you wanted us to identify opportunities so you can make some decisions on what in fact you want to implement.
So I'll make two suggestions, but I want to clarify. So if we take things out, like, okay, I'm looking at textbooks, drivers, that's in big dollars, $420,000. Those are still needs. They're not structural changes to the budget. They're just kind of deferring a cost that we probably need to make at some point in the future, and just not putting it in this year's budget. Maybe it's in fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 20. So it's just a one-time deferral of dollars. Is that right? Whereas, I'm not proposing this cutting math coaches seems to be a virtual, like, we're not going to do this.
And I hate to put this on teaching and learning, but that's, I think, the committee that would have the jurisdiction at least to come up with a recommendation as to what we should do as a board with respect to that. There might be topics on here that overlaps a couple of committees. It'll take some effort to make sure we're communicating with each other, coordinating with each other, and on the same page. But yes, you identify those issues.
I was just going to say, Brad, I think what you actually just illustrated is really the kind of the core of the challenge moving forward. If you want to be able to permanently reduce costs and reallocate things on in a sustainable way, those cuts are going to have to come in personnel cuts. You're going to have to eliminate programs to be able to, on a recurring basis, significantly fund more dollars. Most of most of the items, certainly professional development, you don't have to do it. You can push those pieces out, but the simulators, even the replacement of the student information system, there's a point where that's going to happen, and you're going to incur that cost. So most of those are cost deferrals. You're just pushing that down the road, but there's a point where you're going to make that expense if you want to permanently be able to restructure costs in the budget. That's going to have to come from.
So, looking at textbooks and driver's ed, $420,000, one-time savings, theoretically we would divert those dollars to facility improvements, which we've already made improvements in our budget, and then what we're allocating for fiscal year next summer, those are already funded improvements. So we don't necessarily need those dollars right now to make the investments in the buildings that we've already got planned. It would be just future years savings, but we're going to have to make this investment anyway in textbooks and driver's ed.
I disagree with that statement in the one sense that we have things that we may have that are going to break now. Let's talk about Jefferson's carpet, for instance. Is that my belief is that we ought to do that now, because it's a health hazard almost, the way I'm reading this thing. So, I mean, just again, pushing it down the road is not that easy. I think it comes back to, I'd like to get a pretty quick feel for what these current demands are, because we're trying to fund this magical $4 million differential between the reset and the $6.5 million Sherman Durgis. So if we have $4 million that we don't need next year, fine. But I think there are $4 million that we're going to need some of that. And again, we have some fund balance, we have some other things, but the reality is, I think we have to be on the road to do that. And I'm concerned about deferring some of these, what I would call significant items that are going to either cost us more or health of students. That's troubling me. So I think, again, when we get to the Jefferson carpet, or we already passed that, right? No. Okay. I'm very much for that, because I think that's an issue, because I can't count on a new Jefferson building anymore. I was hoping that would happen. We discussed that at length, and now we're not, that's not on the table right now, and I don't know how we're going to do that. So we have to have further discussion on that, and we'll talk about it in fees a little bit too. I just think that, again, we have to be a little clearer on what some of those short-term, real significant needs are.
Just one last thing. It won't help us in this budgeting cycle, but I do think we should try to forecast the TIFs that'll be ending long-term, as well as, again, any contracts that might go to bid and any potential savings we might see. I think we owe it in the conversation, again, not this year, because there are none, but in future years, we need to take a look at that and try to forecast that.
Isn't that in our 5-year plan already, Bill? I know that the TIFs in Wheaton that are going away are included in the plan.
TIF 2, I think, is 6 years out, so it's just
Yeah, but
outside.
TIF 1 just expired, and
Yeah.
we've already included those dollars in our budget.
We did account for the new growth coming on the tax rolls
Right.
in our models going back, yes.
Right, and really, when we talk about rebidding, if I'm clear on what was said earlier, there's about 5 contracts that are rebid, in addition to the teachers' contracts, obviously, the salary side. But they're the maintenance services, they're the food services, they're the transportation services. What am I missing? So, and of those, which ones do we even have the opportunity to bid this year? Again, I heard a lot of that smoke in the referendum, and to be truthful, we've done a great job in doing what we can on those. It's not like we automatically renewed something. We've done our diligence to get these things done, and the terrible thing that happened last year was the transportation. It went up, and then on top of that, we get money from the state to offset transportation costs, and guess how much we got? Practically nothing. So it's really it's a real challenging environment. But I feel good about being part of the finance committee, that we have tested all those waters and we have proceeded with them. We have to start finding better ways. We're reducing supply costs by 1%. Well, let's just arbitrarily call it 3%. Well, you know what? We're not going to have any supplies anymore. So I think we have to watch out for that kind of stuff. But I feel comfortable that we have bid everything that we should be bidding at. If somebody's got a better idea, or somebody knows something that I don't know, I'd be more than happy to have that, emailed to me, secretly sent to me, or, somehow tell me what we've missed, because I don't know what it is.
Respectfully, I'm trying to eliminate speculation, right? Because we saw an awful lot of that. And if we can eliminate speculation and deal in fact, we're going to have a much better conversation.
You said that was a setup question.
Rob's learning fast.
Here, I think, I'll just make a comment here. This is an observation that for 6 years I've been sitting on the board, and I will tell you, we've never gotten into the board level, have never gotten into this detail items. This is not our role. We need, the rules are pretty clear. We have a fund balance policy we have to follow. There's a Sherman Durgis policy we have to follow, and we always bring forward a balanced budget. My suggestion is, these are not our choices. These are the boots on the street. These folks know better than we do, and their staffs know better than we do what they can give up. We know something has to be given up, and I just believe that they've got a list here that they've shared with us, which is great. But at the end of the day, I don't think we as a board should decide whether $210,000 gets cut out of technology. They've got to make that decision. They're the ones who know what's going on within the curriculum and in the organization. The policies are set, bring a balanced budget back to us, and we move forward. So maybe I'm trying to make this too simplistic, but I don't believe that we should be picking and choosing from these items as a board member.
Yeah, I hear you, Jim, but I guess then respectfully, what I need to know and hear then is what's the expectation of the board and the amount of money that's going into next year's budget around capital funding? Is it $2.5 million or is it more than $2.5 million? I'm happy to bring you a budget and a set of associated cost reductions that address that number if we'd rather go at it that way. But that part then's got to be clear. If we're going to bring a number, I need to know what we're bringing a number to that meets obviously the expectation and the directive around the board or of the board.
Yeah, and you and I had a little email exchange on that just from Friday's notes, but I mean, at the end of the day, is 6.5 million the number by the policy for 18? If it is, that's where we have to go. If it isn't, then, you know, so be it.
Again, $6.5 million is the number in the Sherman-Durgis modeling. Certainly from my perspective, I think throughout the discussion around the referendum, we were crystal clear that it'd be very difficult, it will be very difficult to achieve that target for next year without the ability to make personnel cuts, which we don't have the ability to do. And so that's why certainly in the financial modeling, we showed that reset, that non-reset number kicking in the fiscal 19 budget for that very reason that I don't disagree with you. I guess what I'm going to say is in order to bring, I would assume that the target of, or the charge of the board and the charge of the community is to bring a budget that reflects the will of the board, but also to bring that budget, whatever it is, that protects the interest of the school district in kind of the most acceptable way. For me to bring you a budget that shows $6.5 million funded toward capital projects for next year, it's kind of like asking me to do that without all the tools in my arsenal because of the timing of where we are. You ask me to do that 12 months out, right? There's going to be pain in those cuts that I'm going to bring to you, but I know that I have the ability with our team internally to look across all of the systems and really evaluate where can we make those cuts that most appropriately protects the interests of our students. I don't have all those tools in my arsenal right now, so that's why this is the list of things that the board got. I did that obviously responding to, I think, a request from the board to understand what is available, you know, at this point, you know, and I know we've got to begin to make some of those decisions, but in the big picture, if you want me to bring a $6.5 million plan, I've got to have all the tools available to me to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to be recommending things to you that I don't believe in, but I'm doing it just based on timing and circumstance and where we sit. And I don't know that that's fair to everybody sitting inside this room or outside the room.
And that's a fair analysis. I'll support that. I understand you. There are limitations and access to opportunities that you don't have right now in this currently anticipated fiscal year. So I guess I'm back to the same point. Let's agree that 2.5 is the number for fiscal 18, right? And you guys know best how to bring that to us. And so I would support that, and fully knowing that the reset number for fiscal 19 is that 6+ number, and you'll have access, or hope we'll have access to other elements that can get us there. Is that a fair statement?
And Jim, the other thing that's happened here is over the last couple months, Jeff and the staff have received requests from board members, the old board members and now some of the new board members, to identify areas where we might be able to make cuts for this year in anticipation of trying to build up to that 6.5 million number for next year. And this is responding to it. And if it is the will of the board members to analyze those items that could be cut or could be adjusted, then I think that needs to happen first at the committee level with input from the staff. It could be that the committee will decide it's not appropriate to do it this year, we don't want to do it, and then they'll end it. Or the committee could present it to the board, and we as a board could say, no, I don't think we want to do that this year. We're going to try to reach the 2.5 million target, and that's it. But members of the board have expressed to Jeff and the staff a desire to look at some items that could be adjusted for this budget year, and that's the only reason I suggest that what's been reviewed here in the PowerPoint be assigned to the committees so they can make some decisions with staff input about whether we should proceed with addressing those cuts, those possible cuts.
I have one reaction to that, and number one, I agree with Jim in the sense that I think, we need to turn that over to you and make a decision. I also agree that the $2.5 million number should be the number with the tools available, as you called it. And I think to Rob's point that, we need to look to the future though, and I want to know as we move along what some of those, as those tools become clearer, on some of the big impact, because I don't want to, I don't want the community saying, well, guess what, the referendum failed and they changed all the stuff and moving right along, same as normal. So, because we're going to get hit, and I think we have to keep the community informed of that, and we're touching on it now. And I think that's what we're doing right now, and it's really going to impact us a year out, is what we're saying right now. And I think it's an important issue that the community understands, that we're taking these steps to address those as we move in that direction. We don't have available the tools now and so on, so that I think is a very acceptable idea. So I would totally support that.
Dr. Schuh, does that give you some direction? Great. Then we'll move back to the action item part of the agenda. And the first item under the action item is the approval of the 2017-18 fee schedule. Dr. Schuh.
Yeah, so this was an item on the last board meeting that we had brought a recommendation to the board for a fee schedule that actually was the same as the fee schedule that was in place for this school year. The board asked the administration to go back and review that with the finance committee and look at any potential recommendation for increases to the fee schedule. Just by way of quick recap, I guess two things that I want to share on the fee schedule. We are allowed to assess fees within the school district, but those fees have to be tied to a specific purpose that they're funding. We provide for the community free and appropriate public education, but there are allowable circumstances where you can charge a fee for a particular either activity service that you're providing or another either consumable or item that the district is providing. And so our fees generally fall into three categories. You have just a general registration or textbook fee. Incorporated in that is kind of what was always considered the general registration or textbook fee, and then the district added a specific technology fee that got folded into that together. So even though it's generally represented as one number, it's actually two separate components within that. You have fees then associated with activities and athletics that students participate in, generally at the middle and high school level, and then there are some specific course consumable fees. Those are always fees that are tied very specifically to students who are taking a class, and there's a workbook that needs to be purchased as a part of that class, and so there's a direct consumable fee. So the finance committee reviewed those fees, and certainly one determined that on the consumable side, those fees are reviewed already on an annual basis because they are charged dollar for dollar for the costs associated with that particular class. I think on the activity side, I think there was definitely acknowledgement from the finance committee that we need to take a much more careful look at the fees that we're charging for our activities. A number of years ago, the district did a cost analysis of all of the activities and sports that we provide, and certainly recognized that they don't all cost the same. So the portion of the cost that the district is absorbing to run those activities varies greatly across the activities that we provide. So, students, while they're paying the same fee to participate in cross-country or in gymnastics, certainly the cost that the district is absorbing varies greatly. And so I think the Finance Committee felt strongly that we really need to take a careful look at that over the next 12 months before the fees are presented again, and see if in fact the current model that we have of just kind of one universal fee for sport should continue, or we need to look at a different model that perhaps moves a greater portion of that participation cost to the families of the students that are participating. The third bucket, those at kind of the kind of general registration textbook / technology fee. That was one area that the Finance Committee felt appropriate to increase this year, given the fact that we haven't seen an increase in that fee for 7 years. That was the one that we felt appropriate to increase now, and so the recommendation of the Finance Committee was a 3% increase to that portion of the fee. Important to note that certainly the monies collected for the general textbook fees, some portion of it covers costs that we provide or cover out of district level budgets. Some portion of that fee is also returned directly to buildings to use in their supply accounts for supplies that they're purchasing at the building level. That amount per student that goes back to the buildings has also not changed over that 7-year window of time. So while it gets adjusted each year based on the number of students at a particular building, so if a building goes from 400 to 380 students, they get less money based on the number of students, but that amount per student allocated back has not changed. We've basically in the district, our supply accounts have been pretty level over a long period of time. That began, I think, in the last set of budget cuts and hasn't really returned. So, Mr. Farley, did I miss anything else in the background from the Finance Committee?
Driver's ed.
Driver's education, that driver's education fee, we are charging the maximum that is allowable by school code, absent going back to a waiver. So if that, again, is a part of the whole driver's ed discussion, if that's a fee we wanted to rethink or relook at in the future, that would require a whole waiver process of the school code. You couldn't do that in the time we have prior to the next school year.
We would have to do that waiver annually? Or is it?
Yeah, no, I think you just have to
do it one time and then it renews.
And that would be to increase that particular fee.
Correct.
Are we starting our discussion on fees? Okay, I'm going to start it because I'm the one who put the motion out there last time to remove it, to bring it to the Finance Committee, which I appreciate them looking at. So the 3% for registration fees breaks down to $3 a year for elementary, $4 a year for middle school, and $6 a year for high school students. The one thing that when I was looking at the fees really came to mind to me was the amount of technology that we have added in the past several years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about, our lease for Chromebooks is about $215,000 a year. Am I right in saying that? Somewhere around.
The lease for just the Chromebook?
Yeah. Really looking at about, it's a little, if I remember right, it's about a $200,000 a year.
I think the lease may be a little bit bigger than that.
Okay.
The increase to our budget last year as a result of adding that cost was about $213,000, and we increased the tax budget.
So I understand where you're coming from, saying we need something that's maybe a little more tangible if we're going to have an increase. We did have significant increase in the amount of devices to bring down our student device ratio. I would like to propose that we look at adding a technology fee to cover some of that cost. We have not raised these fees in 7 years. We're talking about minimal $3 a year fee, which breaks down to about 25 cents a month. for per student. For our registration fees, I think it makes sense to add some kind of a technology fee onto that to cover some of this technology that we've, I think it's a legitimate cost. So I would like to explore the idea of doing that for this upcoming year, increasing that fee.
In light, I'm going to respond as we discussed it in the Finance Committee. Basically, there's a component of the fee that just goes directly to the school, the buildings. And that component of the fee has been fixed. That represents a budget that building will spend. So that's a component of that fee. So, and that has not gone up in the 7 years either, they each went. The other side of this, the reality is, if we start saying that we're going to start charging for everything, we've lost sight of the fact that we're a public body that is supposed to provide education. So I think that we have a fine line here, and when we started comparing those costs to other surrounding districts that may or may not have more technology than we have, we wanted to be in a fair place, because otherwise we're going to have an objection. Okay, and that objection is something that will cost us more to fight than going the other way. So I think that, again, we raised about $1.2 million, I think is the number, and is that about right, Bill? $1.4 million. And, you know, and then there's certain segments of the community that are the low-income areas who really, in many cases, can't pay it, and we cannot charge it to them. So, you know, I think, again, we have to remember we're a public body, and we just can't start charging fees for everything. And so I think we're trying to gain that balance on it. You know, I mean, if you follow the logic that cost of living's gone up 3%, we should be increasing this 21%. And if we did that, I think we would start running into that, you know, that battle of, are we providing a public education or not? And I think in technology, I think that's part of the curriculum we must provide. And you know, you say it's only $3. Well, I'm going to say $3 more isn't going to change that fundamental philosophy. All those other costs that we're looking at, you know, let's get into the activities. You know, how many times have we had chat with the board, who, you know, and the program we went to at the the School Board Association. You know, those are critical parts of education, the activities. So if we don't have activities, you know, and we start charging too much fees where people don't attend those or whatever, you know, we're going to start, you know, having a problem on providing a good education to a lot of our students. So, you know, in this coming year, we're going to look at the sport costs. There was a discussion about that at the chat with the board at Wheaton South the other day, and you know, maybe track and field should have a different fee than you know, lacrosse. That's another topic, but you know, but anyway, my point is that that study will occur. But I think if we go back to that core fee, when we, you know, I don't know what the right number is. We said 3%. It's kind of a, you know, what our cost of living went up this last year. You know, the cost related to it didn't go up a lot. The technology component, but you know, I'm not passing. We're not at the point we're passing on that technology cost to our students, because that's something we have to provide as a public body.
But we don't have to provide technology.
Well,
I think we've made a choice on that to increase the number of devices. I look at this as we're looking at potentially cutting drastic amounts out of our budget, and you know, we can look at possibly, okay, maybe some of I feel we can pass a technology fee on because we have provided an actual tangible item, rather than just saying, let's raise our fees 21%. I think that we can say, because we are providing more, we've reduced the number of, or we've reduced the ratio of student to device out there, it's a legitimate expense. That's where I'm coming from on it.
I think it's time for, you know, I personally don't think we should, but you know, that's I need some guidance at this point. But that's kind of the philosophy that the Finance Committee, how we look at it, how we reach the conclusion. So.
Yeah, let me join in here. On the Finance Committee, we concluded that the registration fee came about in the mid-1990s, and it was somewhat arbitrarily set. We had a figure, the school code allowed it, and so it was imposed. And a good chunk of it does go back to each individual building for supplies and capital. And that part that goes back to the buildings hasn't changed in the last 7 years. And we had no data available to us to judge what sort of increase there has been in the cost of supplies and to the buildings. So it was somewhat arbitrary, and we came up with a 3% figure as kind of a fair figure. Right now, we compared the fees we charge for registration to 7 other districts. Burlington is first, they have the highest registration fees. Batavia comes second. We're tied for third with Geneva. Fourth is Elmhurst, then we're tied for fourth with Geneva. And then Naperville 203 and St. Charles are below us. A 3% raise in the registration fee keeps us about in the same position. In fact, the 15% add-on for technology would keep us in about the same position. We wouldn't change much. We'd still be about 3rd or 4th in the roster of the 8 districts we compared ourselves to. I give this background. The 3% was arbitrary because the initial setting of the registration fee 22 years ago was relatively arbitrary. And I'll leave it at that.
I don't question the 3%. I understand that. But in terms of the technology costs, I mean, we've invested a lot in our technology infrastructure the last 4 years, and it has a direct impact on student learning. And that investment in technology has diverted dollars that we otherwise could have put towards capital needs. I think the number was like $4.5 million. I don't know if we can recoup those costs as related to a specific technology fee, but I do know that those school districts that do a one-to-one program, most of those school districts pass through a purchase cost to the student. They buy insurance. That cost is funneled through the school district. So yet here we are. We're not one-to-one, that's a decision we made as a board, but we're carrying a cost to lease all these devices that students use, but we're not recouping it like other school districts are. So, I'm kind of with Chris, I am with Chris, that to implement a $15 per student fee, I think has a pretty significant, I don't know if it keeps us level to where we are, but it's a pretty, I would imagine, 13,000 students minus low income. If we can justify it, and it has a structural impact on our budget every individual year that allows us to keep 3 or 4 teachers in that conversation a year from now, then I agree that we should do it. It's a cost impact borne by those who use our schools. And I think that's an important consideration. And I'm one of those types too.
I guess what I would suggest here is, I think the timing, first of all, is very ironic, okay? And I believe, number 2, that if we're going to do this, let's do an overall comprehensive assessment of everything that should be reviewed and adjusted if that's appropriate. And then do that in a timing where we can notify the parents and give them some heads up on what's going on and why it's going on, so there's a preparation for that event and there's no surprises. This fee schedule is ready to be approved and moved on without any changes. I'm not being critical of someone asking for those changes, but what I've heard here, there's a lot of elements that we haven't touched on, right, that you believe they're going to be addressed in a future date. So I would suggest that, the $37,000 benefit to me, I think is going to have pushback because we're just doing this in a very, the timing is just ironic that how we're doing this. And I believe that if we're going to do it, we should do it in a comprehensive fashion. Think through it very carefully, validate it, share it with the parents, and then put them on notice that this is what we're going to be doing a year from now, so they can plan accordingly and that there's just no surprises. So that would be my, I'm not going to support it as it is. I think that, I've said my piece. I think we just need to look at it overall and give some heads up early on.
I need clarity on that. Number 1 is there's a proposal that we had previously that was going to leave it fixed. Okay. Then there's a proposal now to move it up 3%, I believe, on the general fee, leaving the other fees in place for a study to address the entire thing next year. And thirdly, address none of that until next year. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, you pretty good, I confused you, but yes, I would suggest that we just, for the $37,000 benefit, I believe that we take a full snapshot and review the entire, all the elements of fees and put some real solid logic around them. Mr. Broman said 3% was arbitrary. You know, maybe it needs to be 5%, I don't know, maybe it needs 1%, but I believe that all these things, you know, that have been raised are, I think, fair game, so to speak, but I think it has to be done in a very mindful and a different timing element and do it in a comprehensive way, all fees being considered.
So, Jim, what do you think about what do you think about the idea of instituting a $15 technology fee per student for those students who use technology, and maybe not accepting the 3%, which is perhaps arbitrary, and just going back to where we were last year? That's it. So that's an alternative idea.
Well, I think $15 is arbitrary.
Well,
I agree.
So, anyway.
My perception is if we did a study, a true cost study, and assess it as we talked about in the future, it's probably going to be greater than 3%. That's just my gut. I mean, costs have gone up, programs are expensive, uniforms, go down the list of stuff, right? It's expensive. It's not going to make the increase any more palatable. And so I'm trying to understand what we're really after. You know, are we after trying to set a tone of cost collection, of cost recoup, or are we really trying to figure out what the true cost of those programs are and have a fair and transparent conversation about those costs? Because I think that's a better option than and I think that's going to be more painful, frankly, than a 3% on a few things, on a technology fee today, or $15, whatever it might be. And I would rather do it with data than perception.
Well, as I said before, there's no data that we have with respect to registration fees. I mean, there's just nothing there. So we were asked to take a look at it, we being the Finance Committee. We said since these fees, registration fees hadn't been raised in over 7 years, maybe a small raise would be appropriate. We were mindful of what our benchmark districts were charging for fees, so we came up with 3%. But we did recognize, as Jim pointed out, that with respect to activities and athletics, we do need to have a comprehensive review of that. I'm not sure if there is any sort of comprehensive review will do anything to change the registration fees. So that's why we thought we could move ahead with that. And with the course fees, as Dr. Schuler pointed out, those are based upon budgets that the department heads at the middle school and high school set for those courses, and they're paid back dollar for dollar. So that's a given there. So that's the background.
I think in light of Mr. Gambiani's prior comment, I think we should turn it over to Dr. Schuler and his staff to make a suggestion to us, and we vote on that and say yay or nay and move forward.
You have a recommendation to you with the board agenda tonight, so.
And that's the
3% increase on the registration fee, your basic registration fee, with an understanding that the student activity component of that fee will be studied at a much greater depth over the next couple of months for next year.
As well as the driver's ed and the technology.
We can certainly fold technology into that.
I just want to say thank you. I was mixing the buckets of fees. You're right. That was a great point. I appreciate that.
And this does not mean, it certainly doesn't mean that we can't review imposing a technology fee. I would assume that would be something that the Finance Committee of the future would address one way or the other and see what happens there.
I'd like to know what other districts are doing in that regard as well, as part of the whole comprehensive review of this, to see what they would be if we go that direction.
And if we don't approve this tonight, has an impact on registration, which needs to start in the next couple weeks. So as long as we make that, and we have to do that, we have to start registration, as long as we make the commitment to review these things we've just talked about, which probably has a bigger drop in the bucket over the next year.
I would think that if we vote on this and it fails, we would go to an alternative. And if it fails, we go to a different alternative. And so I would suggest we make a recommendation of one and vote on it and see what happens and then go from there.
Is there any other discussion? If not, ask for a motion and a second to approve the fee proposal submitted by staff to the board.
I'll make a motion to accept the fee as presented.
Can we just, can you remind me of the timing constraints with registration again, please?
With registration, you do not have another board meeting before that registration needs to get released to students.
Thank you.
So we have a motion from Mr. Matheson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Let me just understand, is this a motion to, this is the motion to just, to accept the 3%? No.
Mr. Gambiani?
No.
Mr. Hanlon?
No.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Vroman?
Yes. The motion passes. Next up, action item is approval to purchase Power School Student Information System. Dr. Schuler?
I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Mack to provide the background on the implementation of the new SIS.
Yes, this is something that was shared at the Master Tech Plan for replacing Synergy. It's a process that started about a little over a year ago when one of the updates kind of wreaked havoc. Again, Synergy's been with us now for over 5 years. Biggest issues we have with Synergy are during updates, major updates, system updates from versions. From version 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 is where we have experienced most of our problems. Got committees together to look at the different choices out there, had narrowed it down to 2, both eSchool Plus and Power School, and the committee chose Power School. Also, Power School purchased eSchool, so the option for eSchool kind of went away, which kind of actually pushed this to this meeting. It probably would have been brought forward sooner, but because of their inner workings in their 2 companies, it just took a while to get a proposal together. We're looking at doing this implementation beginning really once this is approved, with a lot of the back-end data work, working with getting information from Synergy, but if approved next year, Synergy will still be the, call it the SIS of record, or Student Information System of Record, with Power School running alongside it, beginning to do trainings and everything along it. So really, Power School would not kick into the system of record until the following school year, not 17-18, but 18-19. Programs are very similar. Again, doing a lot of the same things, just a different structure, different database structure. But this is, again, something that came up at the Master Tech Plan. Is something that a lot of the staff users and stuff, we have not had an outage this year that caused major frustrations, but we kind of feel with Synergy, we sit and wait for the next one. So I think that's kind of what really prompts this. Any questions on that? I know there's some questions that were asked during the presentation or during the emails, but.
Can you cover one thing? I think, so you highlighted the notion of updates, but I think to some degree that short sells the issues as a result of the updates. So the student information system, what are some of the key elements that it controls within our system that have been impacted when those updates have gone awry?
Sure. Yeah, with the updates really kind of, they ripple effect probably through the majority of the users. The latest ones that happened were weighted grades and things had changed. Some things with attendance taking, which again, when you think a major student information system, those are two systems that should definitely happen and work effectively, the attendance taking and the weighted grades. After the last updates, teachers who had weighted grades in the system, the weighted grades went away. Imagine the frustration when parents and students are looking at their grades one day and, Mom, Dad, I've got a B, and then all of a sudden, no, it's a C because the weighted grades went away. You know, what kind of frustrations those wade through. A lot of that when it comes to attendance taking, again, you know, attendance really is one of the main driver for the end of the year reporting for student attendance for funding we get from Illinois, that we have to make sure that those attendance records and everything are accurate. That has been something we deal with every year, kind of looking at a little bit the attendance record keeping and reporting very, very closely each year to make sure that those are accurate. But those are probably the two systems that in the last 2 or 3 updates have had minor glitches or something that affect us in Illinois. Again, Synergy we were the first in Illinois to use Synergy. Since then, only one other district right now has joined on the Synergy, so I'm not going to say it's an Illinois issue, but it just seems us being the first to the door with Synergy, they really weren't Illinois ready for a lot of that work. So again, we haven't had any major ones this past year, but we don't know what the next upgrade over the summer could bring to us.
Questions, comments from board members?
Should consideration be given, as this particular item was identified as potential additional FY 18 reductions, should it be removed from the vote tonight until that decision is made? Just point of order, I guess, as it relates to the action item before us.
Yeah, I think if the board wants to have additional conversation about that potential cut, then I would not encourage you to take action on this tonight, certainly not action in support of implementing a new student information system.
I have a question, Ron. So this is the system that also does all the scheduling as well?
Yes, that's correct.
The original report that we got, and maybe I just wasn't appreciating what we got, it made it sound to me like we had just found something that would work better, that we would like better. We wanted to switch to a different system. If you're telling us that on a daily basis we're wondering whether it's going to crash, my experience in the schools when working in guidance is that's the lifeblood. And if I worked in a district that had e-school, if e-school was down, everything stopped. There was no communication between teachers and guidance. You couldn't do the scheduling, you couldn't be tweaking things that you need to tweak every day. I mean, every guidance counselor sits there with that system in front of them all day long. So I just want to point out that that was a bigger magnitude than what I thought I was originally hearing.
Yeah, and let me correct that. I think we're waiting for the next update. Synergy has never been down. Our system that runs Synergy stays up. When Synergy causes problems is during a mandatory update. I think the last one we pushed out was after spring break where we have to update. You know, you get to a certain version and any little glitch systems we might have. Think of any product that comes out. Apple iOS is probably the easiest. Came out, a new thing for your iPhone and drained your battery. They pushed out the new next update and they said, go get 5.23, you know, whatever that version was. That's where we get glitches, but on a daily basis, it's not down. And they actually, since this last one, this past year and a half, the reason we probably haven't had anything the past year is there have been no updates. They reinvented their kind of the way they do their updates because we kind of screened, and I think a bunch of other people did too, and said, you can't do things now in the middle of the year. You can't push things out and expect us to do it over a Thanksgiving break, which is when one of them happened. Everyone came home back from Thanksgiving break, the grades were gone, or were wrong. they were fixed and corrected, but it's that, you know, the daily use of it is there. It's just that's why I say, when I say waiting, we're not waiting for it to break. It's never broken. We dread the next email that says the new update's available, because we kind of want to go, how long can we push that update off? Is kind of how we treat Synergy.
Do you know anything about the proposed system in terms of how often they do upgrades or are likely to do in comparison to Synergy?
They're kind of under the same. I mean, most of them do their yearly upgrades. We would be getting on with Power School. Their latest version just came out most recently. In actuality, all the buildings that we went and viewed when we went to see them using Power School, they're actually not even on the newest Power School yet. They're still using an older version of Power School. I think a lot of, you know, you're not forced to do the update like in a Windows environment. You got to do it tomorrow or it's going to shut off. You can kind of implement them when you want to. I again believe that a lot of our delay where we did them over Thanksgiving break was because they wanted it done over the summer and we couldn't do it because it would have ruined the schedule. You know, so I mean, you could have these issues with any one of them, but I think the Illinois piece is a big piece with Synergy not being Illinois ready. I mean, I think we fight it a little bit more updates because they don't have Illinois attendance records and things like that, and their Power School's been in Illinois for 25 years. So
I'm going to come back, I think, to the question that Mr. Gambia, that you just asked about, you know, this system. To me, the broader discussion around this item is, I think we've just kind of put to rest in a previous conversation where our target funding number is for next year around Sherman-Durgis, but we know what's in front of us in the next 12 months. We know we've got much deeper cuts to make and to do. I think there's a legitimate question. We began this process of the analysis of the system and putting a replacement together a while back. This is not something we just jumped into a month ago and put together. Our buildings have been working on this analysis process for a while, but that was when our circumstances were a little bit different than what our circumstances put in front of us for the next 12 months. Understanding that, I think there's a legitimate basis for saying, you know, let's not do this right now. And see, 12 months from now, if we feel like we're in a different spot, I would suspect if 12 months from now we are cutting much more significant programmatic elements, we may look back and say, boy, we shouldn't have spent $200,000 on a new student information system, understanding kind of the depth of cuts that we're going to get to. With that rationale, I would understand completely if the decision right now were, let's not make this expenditure. That's going to come with some pain and some hurt. That's going to be felt primarily from our buildings, not necessarily even from our levels. They're the regular users of this system and the ones that have recognized the challenges, and candidly, they're the ones that drove the process of saying we need to look at a replacement. So that's going to be felt most directly, certainly within our high schools and our middle schools. But again, you know, I would kind of apply that same logic. We're not voting on simulators, but I would apply some of that same logic to that expenditure right now, which is, you don't have to do this. This is a purchase that you may choose to push off, understanding the magnitude of cut we're about to get to.
So it's a major need. I hear about it from my teacher group. We're not really talking about 200,000. We're talking about 460,000 spread out over 3 years. That at some point in time, we're going to have to wrestle with, whether it's this year or next year.
I have a question, Rod. Is Synergy willing to become Illinois ready, or are they not willing to? I mean, because if they were to becoming Illinois ready, then our cost would just be $90,000 a year, correct?
That's correct. I mean, they are. I mean, technically they're Illinois ready, but I think they've gotten Illinois ready, but they've been took them 5 years to get there. They now have feet on the ground in Illinois. That we have a local company that we work with to help us with these things. I still will say there's issues with some of the reporting features, but we get the information out correctly at the end of each year. We're not, what we're sending out, it's not as simple as a company who might, I don't want to call it a magic button, but print my end of the year report and they hit a button. It's not that simple. For us, it takes a little looking into to make sure it is all accurate and everything before we send it off. But that really affects a few people in this building more than it does the staff aspect of it.
I'm not hearing anything that's convincing me to move forward on this. I guess that's in bottom line. Again, I'm not hearing that it's going to crash. It works. It's somewhat effectively. I don't know whatever software works totally effectively ever. And they're now Illinois better than they were. In the 90,000 again is the last year of a completion, or that's just the ongoing maintenance?
We just have an ongoing maintenance, but we don't have, you really technically have a contract with Synergy. It is a renewal every year with a small, I want to say it went up 1.5% last year. You approve it each year the initial was a 5-year, and since then so the past 2 years have been, this coming year and this year were just a continuation of the extension of the contract.
No, I heard the only thing that discouraged me is the 400,000 total that we're committing to by doing this, or whatever that number was. That's a bigger decision than $200,000. Again, I'm having trouble finding a reason why to move forward.
I think it's too big an investment right now, given all the decisions we have. I recognize that it's painful for our staff. I hear about it. But $460,000 would be great. There's a lot of things that would be great. I would like to revisit this in context of all the other decisions we have to make in the next 12 months.
Dr. Schuler, with that thought in mind, that this is something we may want to revisit in a year or two, what would be the preferred way to go? To table this, or to just vote this down no, and then have you bring it up a year from now or whenever you feel it's appropriate?
I wouldn't table it. I would make a motion and have a vote on it.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to go through the process of motion to approve in a second and then voting on it. We have a motion to approve the purchase of Power School Student Information System.
Can I just offer one quick clarification? Just because that's the staff recommendation, you don't have to make that motion. You can make a motion not to approve the expenditure of the student information system. That's our recommendation, but that doesn't have to be the basis of your recommendation. Don't make a motion if nobody's going to support it.
I'll make a motion that we don't approve the contract.
Is there, it's been moved by Mr. Matheson not to approve the purchase of the Power School Student Information System. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Verman?
Yes. The motion to not approve the purchase of Power School Student Information System passes. And the third action item is the approval of the carpet for the Jefferson Early Childhood Learning Center.
Farley, you want to provide an introduction on this?
Sure. Obviously, with our apartment not passing, we still need to attend to the needs of the school. Carpet is a high priority item. That carpet in the building, I think it's the old Collins and Aikman carpet that's been in that building probably well past its life expectancy, and given the use of the 3- and 4-year-olds and the needs of the students on that carpet is becoming an issue that we need to address. I understand that the board will obviously have to consider moving forward. What we do at Jefferson, it's not, in the past few years, we've had to put in a fire alarm system. We put in a jockey boiler system because we were concerned about the original boiler system. Both of those two systems are somewhat portable, but we've also had some safety issues and had to do some paving work at the school. And this is an item we believe needs to be attended to. Obviously, you're going to have portability, option for the flooring, but if something were to change, but school goes on at Jefferson, and we need to address this issue.
Questions or comments from board members?
I'd like to know what the facility committee is thinking of. I guess I'd want to know, in the facility committee, where is Jefferson a priority in its future? I mean, if we're going to be looking at other alternatives for our early childhood program, I'm not saying building a new building, I'm saying maybe utilizing space elsewhere, maybe renovating this building, and that something like that may be happening in the next year or so. I would question putting $80,000 of carpet in and then we rip it right out and not use it. That would be I guess I'd want to know from this facility committee a better idea there.
Well, the facility committee hasn't met because we just got formed about 30 minutes ago. Maybe it was an hour and a half ago, I don't know. I echo the concern about investing in the building. First off, so these are my personal thoughts. We have an unhealthy learning environment. There is a scenario by which we stay in that building. There's all kinds of different, less options now to best serve our early childhood program that we did years ago, a few months ago, but staying in Jefferson, doing work there is on the table. It's an option. Given this analysis we have to do to look at different options, where does that funding come from? I think we're going to be in that building at least 2 more years. I don't see how any way we can come up with a plan, have it funded, get approved, and still do that work by August of 2018. So I think we're talking about having kids, teachers working and learning and working in that building for at least 2 more years. So I struggle with it too, but even if we came up with an alternate solution that doesn't have the early childhood program at Jefferson, which is a possibility, we still have to then go back and say, do we use that building? Will we use it Woodland for other potential purposes? So that's another domino that would have to fall. So I think there's a couple different scenarios by which we still retain the building. And it's going to be at least 2 years before we come to a conclusion, whatever that is. So even though I struggle with it, I think we're talking about healthy learning environment for kids, working environment for teachers. I don't like doing it. I didn't like investing in the fire alarms and the boilers to keep it warm in the winter months, but I think we have to do it. It's my personal opinion. It's a cost, but it's not $460,000.
Brad used the word struggle, and that's the word that keeps coming to my mind. I'm really struggling with the idea of putting another Band-Aid on Jefferson. And I think it sends a really mixed message to the community about what we're thinking about that facility. So I know I'm new to all of this, and I don't know what everybody's thoughts are, but I know I personally think Jefferson ought to be a huge priority for us. And $80,000 sounds like a whole lot of money to throw into something that we would rip right back out again. So unless someone convinces me otherwise, I'm having trouble with this one.
I'm going to go back to the administration's recommendation on this. I feel you have more insight to it than I do. And, I believe if it's an action item here, that it ought to be considered seriously. I don't know where Jefferson is or what it's going to be, but I'm concerned about if this is a health threat, which is kind of what I've heard from what I read, that the students are affected by it, and these are young kids. I think that's something that I want to be not supporting, I guess, to get this replaced.
But Jefferson remains a very high priority for me, personally. But I agree with Brad. Even if everybody here believes it's the highest priority, I believe that may be the case. But regardless, there's nothing we can do about that building for another 2 years before we can have a new early childhood learning center, if we can find an alternative that will allow us to do that. And I share the concern that Jim Matheson and Brad have expressed, as well as Mrs. Erickson. She has expressed the same concern. And so I'm going to vote in favor of this motion, but I don't want it to be read by the community or other board members here as that Jefferson, it's not a high priority, it's the highest priority in my book. So,
Can I use the term Jefferson kind of loosely? I think the priority is to try to put our early learning program, early childhood program into an environment that's appropriate for those kids. The kind of learning that has to happen, the working environment for those teachers. Jefferson's just the place where that's located. So I agree with everything you said, but the priority isn't Jefferson School, the building. The priority is finding the appropriate environment for that program. And I think we're going to have to be there for 2 more years while we vet out and hopefully come up with a solution and figure out how to fund it and go through the design and construction process. So just to kind of use that term Jefferson interchangeably.
additional comments or thoughts? If not, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve replacing the carpet at our early childhood learning center.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Paulson.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Matheson. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Sadly, I'll say yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mr. Broman?
Yes, the motion to replace the carpeting at our early childhood learning center passes. Well, the next item on the agenda now is written reports. We've all received, we had the opportunity to review the monthly financial report and the Freedom of Information Act report that was provided us for information. The board committee reports were attached to the agenda to the extent that were attached to the agenda.
I just say I love the Teaching and Learning Committee minutes. I'm really excited to hear about some of those conversations. I think they were enticing, let's just put it that way. But you know, as those develop, I'd love to hear some of the comments and survey results and things that might play into this conversation.
It was a 3-hour meeting. I'm happy to chat with all of you on more detail on that. But we are, a lot of stuff is in the process. Excuse me. A lot of stuff is in the process of you know, we're in discussion stage versus ready to bring something to the board table right now. So we're still in some discussion stage. But a lot was covered in our last meeting.
I have a question about the financial reports. It looks like May 31st we'll still have enough money to keep the doors open. And we should then shortly thereafter start receiving I think tax bills will be June 1, so we should start soon. Good.
Any reports from board members?
Yes,
Mrs. Crabtree?
I have a couple things. I had an opportunity last week to go and spend some time at Wheaton, Warrenville South and in a fit environment. And I think since we have a lot of times Faith comes in and gives us presentations, I just wanted to kind of share a few things that I witnessed. I spent time in AP BC Calc. Am I saying that right? Yes, Faith. Okay. And had an opportunity. This is a classroom that utilizes FIT every single day. They use grade cams and Google Classroom for lots of different differentiation. I happened to be there in prep for an AP, getting ready for their AP testing. The thing that I walked away with, the biggest picture that I walked away with, besides the fact that I had a conversation with every single child and asked them how many AP classes they were in, and it shocked me to hear the number that they were in, but the biggest thing that I walked away with was watching them even do things like where they were working on problems around the room on whiteboards, and the collaboration that they had and how comfortable they were taking risks, doing this work in front of each other, and then naturally how they gravitated toward each other and had conversations and pointed out things and made constructive criticisms. And the fact that that collaboration environment is present really showed to me in how comfortable they were in taking those risks and having that time. And for me, a switch flipped in my head that it's less about the end product. We focus so much on that end product, and I think it's more about the journey. And the fact that they have developed these life skills in terms of collaboration. So I loved that. I loved being able to see it, and I wanted to be able to share that with you. The second thing was Dr. Rammer had invited me to join him along with the Rotary, and I had an opportunity to spend an afternoon at TCD. I don't think we talked enough about that opportunity for our students, so I just want to highlight a couple of things. We have 139 students that participate at TCD. 14 districts have formed a collaborative there. So it allows us to, maybe we only have 6 or 7 kids that are interested, say, in fire science. But it allows us, because there are 14 districts involved in that, it allows our students to be able to have that opportunity. There are 19 programs involved at TCD. Most children or most students walk out of there with dual credits and a wide variety of certifications. It's a phenomenal place. I would love to see us promote this more at the middle school level, because I think one of the things they were saying, the challenge is a lot of times kids start getting interested in maybe their sophomore year about going to TCD, but their schedule can't fit it now. And if they were to start looking at it more at the middle school level, and maybe we do more opportunities of open houses there and that, and get parents and students involved, because there are phenomenal programs that are over there. I was watching construction programs where they're building structures that then the fire science practices burning. I mean, it was really interesting. Welding, all kinds of things, EMT programs, just things that they have there that I think is a great service to our students, and I'd like to see that more students would be able to get involved. And then the third thing, real quickly, I was involved with post-prom at Wheaton North this 2 weekends ago, I think it was. 546 students had a safe prom night because of post-prom. 89 volunteers it took to pull it off. I can't say enough about that experience. I know Wheaton South has theirs coming up. I would love to make sure that that is something that continues for our students. They loved it. It was great to see our 16, 17, 18-year-olds in, change from, you have their hair all still up, but they're bouncing around in bouncy houses and playing games and just having some good, clean fun. And so I can't say enough good about that. So
I have a very short report. Last Wednesday, I had the privilege to join Jeff in meeting with Mr. Bill Vollmer. Mr. Vollmer spoke before our board on public comments, and I think in December and January, questioning whether we should go to referendum or not. He wanted to meet with us because he had some ideas and share some thoughts. And it was part of our listening tour, if you will. And he shared with us some very constructive ideas, and again, it was a very fruitful and encouraging conversation, and I wanted to publicly express my appreciation to him for the comments and thoughts he shared. He's done his homework, and so there are people out there that we need to contact and have that as part of that listening tour. I've already covered the committee assignments, so I won't go over that again. The ISP has notified us that if we want to submit a proposed resolution for the upcoming conference in November, we need to do so by June 21st. We haven't done so for a couple of years. We had done it prior to that for a number of years. I've been thinking about drafting a resolution to submit. I don't know what what's our annual fee for ISD? Approximately $17,000. It's based upon the size of students in our district. However, at the delegate conference, we get one vote along with all the other districts in the state. And I thought about drafting a resolution that won't go anywhere. To kind of highlight that inequity a little bit, somewhat.
And you can tackle school funding too.
That's right. I'll do it all. And finally, we're trying to reschedule a board self-evaluation meeting. We thought that was going to be in October. Is any further word, Jeff, on when that might be?
No, I think based on our last discussion and Barb's availability, it's probably going to have to wait until spring.
That's Barb telling us from me, yeah. So, and that's it from our report. Topics for future discussion, update on community engagement plan, update on social emotional learning, and again, the facility master plan next steps. Our next regular meeting is going to be June 14th, 2017 at 7 p.m. here at the Student Service Center. And we have public comments, and we have one person signed up for public comments. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a question or comment on an agenda item. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values thoughts and questions. The board strives to make the best decisions for the district, and public input in a variety of venues is very helpful. The board must protect the civility and decorum of this meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of the board and democratic process in your comments tonight. Please use the microphone, state your name, and whether you are a resident of the district, and address your comments to the board. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Be factual and courteous. Do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board staff. If you feel your matter needs to be discussed in more detail, please attend the board's chance to chat or present your comments in writing to us. Mr. Harold Wonks has comments on the consent agenda. Harold?
Oh, that's one of the topics. Yes, my name is Harold Wonks. I do live here in District 200. I'd just like to thank Jim Matheson for his comments regarding the consent agenda and offering to be more transparent in the discussions that take place before the meetings, between that Friday before the meeting and tonight. I know you guys had an interesting discussion about the student fees and what the other unit districts charge. And I know Barrington came in as a highest registration fees. However, they also include all sports fees. They don't have a technology fee, so if you have a student that just does 2 sports, Barrington is now less than us. So, you know, some of these registration fees, and when you start adding technology fees, it gets kind of mixed up, because when you just look at straight registration fees, but not other fees that you must pay, it gets somewhat distorted. So I just want to say that, you know, when you start looking, down the road for fees, I mean, there's a lot more to take into account. I know, the fees were started, arbitrarily, and the fees were just put in. So I just want to put that forward, saying that even though we're in the middle of the pack, even, it just depends on what the students do and so on. And the other comment that came up during the finance meeting the other week, I thought there was going to be some discussion about the number of students that on free and reduced lunch that don't pay any student fees, what the number is and the amount of money that's involved. And that's my only other comment I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I also compared what Barrington has paid for parking and other fees before we move on. We're now going to closed session. Closed session items are listed for possible action. The purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired, according to 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, subparagraph 5, and setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the public body, again pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, and subparagraph 6. Therefore, I ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the closed session for the purpose of discussing the purchase or lease of property. Is this a motion?
I move we adjourn the closed session.
Moved by Mr. Paulson. Second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please come?
Before she calls the roll, I just want to clarify, there is no action suggested after this closed session.
Yeah, there is no action. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes, motion to go to closed session passes.